Chapter 131. I had to admit that this man had sharp eyes. He could easily recognize the difference between the jade bracelet and the dark green bead from the items I carried with me. I lifted my head to look at him. After pondering for a while, I said, "It's used to raise ghosts." As soon as I said that, the stern young man frowned. The people from the Metaphysics Society also turned to look at me in surprise. In feng shui and many Taoist magic arts, souls or ghosts were used. For example, the 5 ghosts transporting technique, the 5 Ding 5 Jia protective spell, and so on. There was even a low-level technique to invite ghosts to possess one's body. Although it had many uses, in the study of feng shui and orthodox Taoism, the art of raising ghosts was an evil and crooked path. This was because the ghosts used in those techniques were temporarily summoned. They were either wandering souls or wild ghosts from the 9 underworlds. However, the ghost-raising technique required the cultivator to raise ghosts, so it was different in nature. Ghosts and other worldly items were inauspicious. They could be used, but they couldn't be raised. This was the orthodox point of view in feng shui. Except for some feng shui masters in Nanyang, who had learned some superficial Taoist techniques from the Central Plains and some special sects in the country, there were very few people who knew how to raise ghosts. After listening to me, people were startled. They didn't understand why a feng shui master with a good cultivation base like me would raise ghosts. The stern young man kept silent for a while. Then, he said to me, "Summon the ghosts." I nodded and hesitated for a while. Then, I contacted Tong Tong and asked her to release 2 ghosts from her jade bracelet. Very quickly, a stream of light flashed before everyone's eyes and 2 faint spirits appeared before them. However, after they appeared, the spirits did not pounce at them like before. Instead, they stood there, not daring to move. In fact, their bodies were even trembling. I understood that this place was the headquarters of the Metaphysics Society, so it was protected by a formation that could restrain ghosts and evil spirits. Although ordinary people couldn't sense it, ghosts wouldn't dare to act rashly. It was just like the old witch. When she found me, I could have fought her if I had released all the ghosts in my jade bracelet. However, she had attacked me in the Shenzhen branch. There was a formation there, so it was useless to summon the ghost. The cold-faced young man stared at the 2 ghosts for a while, and didn't say anything. He just waved his hand in the direction of the door. Soon after, 2 men in black hurried to come. "Call 2 people who know how to raise ghosts." I could see that the stern young man had a high position. After he gave his order, the 2 men in black didn't question him and immediately left. The room fell into silence. The young man stood there with his eyes slightly narrowed, not moving an inch. Around 10 minutes later, the 2 men in black returned to report. They were accompanied by 2 sinister old men. These 2 old men should be the ones who knew how to raise ghosts. As soon as I saw them, I understood. Those who know the art of ghost rearing must have frequent contact with ghosts, so their bodies are contaminated with ghost energy. Looking at their gloomy expressions, it is obvious that they are quite accomplished in this field. What shocked me was that the ghost-raising technique was that the Metaphysics Union could find 2 people who knew how to raise ghosts in such a short time. This kind of efficiency was really scary. The 2 old men were very respectful to this young man. They clasped their hands and were about to greet him. However, the young man interrupted them. He pointed at the 2 spirits I had summoned, the jade bracelet and the black bead. He said to the 2 old men, "Please check if these 2 items are used to raise ghosts." The 2 old men didn't dare to be negligent. They walked to me and picked up the jade bracelet and the black bead. After studying them for a few minutes, they turned to the young man and said, "These 2 items have ghost energy lingering around them. I can sense the aura of the 2 ghosts. They should be used to raise ghosts." I had told Tong Tong to cover the jade bracelet and the black bead with energy. After listening to them, I heaved a sigh of relief. However, one of the old men with a slightly protruding head hesitantly added, "But," my heart sank. Did he find something wrong? The cold-faced young man also frowned and asked, "But what?" The bald old man muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "The chi on these two things is quite thick, and it doesn't seem like it could be emitted by these two little spirits. I'm afraid there are other ghosts with high cultivations inside." After listening to him, the young man turned to me and said coldly, "I'll give you one more chance. Summon the thing inside." This time I was silent. The bald old man was talking about Tong Tong. However, Tong Tong was a natural fetus. If I called her out, would this young man or the two old men who had profound knowledge of the ghost-raising technique recognize her? It's not a good thing for Tong Tong or me to have such a treasure. After pondering for a while, I told Tong Tong to conceal her spirit. Then I called her out. The Metaphysics Union wouldn't let go of even the slightest suspicion. If I insisted on not calling Tong Tong out, it was hard to predict what would happen in the end. After Tong Tong came out, the temperature in the room dropped by a few degrees. Waves of energy surged. After so many years, I had gotten used to Tong Tong's energy. However, she was a ghost and a rare natural fetus. Her energy was really heavy and terrifying. The two old men were shocked. After a moment of silence, the bald old man couldn't help but ask me, "Since you're raising this female ghost, I'm afraid she has the power of a ghost marshal, right?" Ghosts and spirits had different levels according to their cultivation base. Above ordinary ghosts there were ghost generals, ghost marshals, ghost kings, and finally ghost immortals. Ghost immortals were also called spirit. Their power was comparable to the heavenly masters. As for the other three realms, they corresponded to the three realms of the earth masters. I nodded and said, "She should be at the ghost marshal realm." I didn't know Tong Tong's real power. However, when I had dealt with Han Wennan, I had poured all of my Tao energy into the Yama brush. Tong Tong's energy had easily reached the same level as mine. In terms of power, she was stronger than me. There was no doubt that she had reached the ghost marshal realm. After the bald old man nodded, he didn't say anything else. The young man with a cold face looked at me one more time. Then, he turned around and checked Zhang Wenfei's belongings. I exhaled in relief. I hurried to bring Tong Tong and the other two ghosts back into the jade bracelet. What happened next wasn't surprising. After the man checked around, he didn't find anything suspicious. Eventually, he let us go. After putting on our clothes and taking our belongings, we hurried to leave the place. The people from the Metaphysics Union arranged for us to stay in a nearby manor. On the way there, I saw people from the other branches. I finally felt relieved. It seemed the Union had temporarily put down their suspicions about us. However, it was different from the time when we were in the True Dragon vein. This time, we were arranged to stay in the Gue area. After the people from the headquarters left, the others quickly gathered in my and Zhang Wenfei's room. Everyone's expression was filled with resentment. When they talked about how they were forced to take off their clothes, all of them were extremely angry, especially Su Shuxing. He shouted that this matter couldn't be settled and that he had to seek justice. What right did the people from the Metaphysics headquarters have to treat us like this? Unlike them, this matter started because of me. After taking their True Dragon's vein, not to mention forcing me to take off my clothes, even if they wanted to take my life, it would be my own fault. There was no one else to blame. I forced a smile and comforted them for a long time. Eventually, they calmed down a little. Although they were saying that they were powerful, in reality, everyone knew in their hearts that the implications of this matter were too great. It would be good enough if they could guarantee that they would not be implicated. There was no way they would be able to get justice. After discussing this matter, we shifted the topic to the Young Phoenix Festival. According to the rules of the Union, the Young Phoenix Festival would start in half a month after everyone had left the True Dragon vein and gathered at the Union. According to our calculations, after this delay, we still have about 10 days to prepare. Previously, at the True Dragon vein, with my help, The 10 people of the Guangdong branch all absorbed enough dragon vein qi and reached the qi-gathering pillar realm. However, this realm has not been completely stabilized, and it will take some time to stabilize it. In addition, after the realm is stabilized, some preparation work will be done to guide the dragon qi baptism. Thus, the time before the Young Phoenix Festival was very tight and couldn't be wasted. After discussing this issue, no one brought up the matter of being forced to take off their clothes. After all, compared to the humiliation, preparing for the Young Phoenix Festival was the most important thing. After a simple discussion, everyone returned to their rooms to continue cultivating and stabilizing their realms. Zhang Wenfei and I also did the same. On the way back, I didn't dare to absorb the dragon qi as I was worried that the true dragon vein's aura would leak. Now that the dark green energy's concealment ability had fooled everyone, I could finally absorb it without worry. I sat cross-legged on the bed and separated the dark green energy from the jade bracelet. In a split second, the dense dragon qi surged towards me and was completely absorbed into my body. Since there were still 4 empty light pillars in my body, I didn't dare to waste any time. From that night onwards, I continued to absorb the dragon qi without rest. Even though the efficiency of absorbing the dragon qi through the jade bracelet was very high, I couldn't recklessly absorb it as I was in the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. While I was absorbing, I tried my best to move the dark green energy to cover all traces. Not to mention the people from the Metaphysics Association's headquarters, even Zhang Wenfei, who was sitting not far from me, couldn't detect it. After cultivating crazily for 4 days, I had finally filled all 5 dragon qi pillars in my body. I heaved a sigh of relief, but I couldn't conceal my excitement. There were a total of 5 dragon qi pillars. Previously, I didn't dare to think that I could fill all of them. Who knew that in just a few days, the true dragon vein had filled all 5 of the dragon qi pillars. The amount of dragon qi contained in them was 5 times that of a person in the same realm. If I were to tell others about it, it would probably scare them to death. As for the true dragon vein in the jade bracelet, there wasn't much change after I had absorbed it. After all, it was an entire true dragon vein. The amount of dragon vein's qi was extremely terrifying. Even if I had more than 100 dragon qi pillars in my body, I wouldn't be able to absorb it all. Moreover, the true dragon vein was a cycle. The dragon vein's qi could be produced on its own. No matter how much I absorbed, it would be able to replenish the dragon vein's qi with time. This was a treasury that could continuously produce dragon vein's qi. Even if my power increased in the future, it would still be very useful to me. I had really gained a huge advantage this time. Of course, I wasn't satisfied with my current realm. I started to think about what I had to do next. Stabilizing my current realm required a process. This process couldn't be rushed and had to be done slowly. Judging from the time, the 5 qi pillars in my body definitely wouldn't be able to stabilize when the fledgling phoenix gathering started. However, we were ranked last among all the branches, so there should be enough time for me to stabilize. After I stopped my crazy cultivation, Zhang Wenfei had already stabilized his qi-gathering pillar realm. In terms of talent, he was actually the best in the Guangdong branch. If I didn't have the jade bracelet, it would be hard to say if my talent could compare to his. Seeing that I had woken up from my cultivation realm, Zhang Wenfei happily called out to me and asked, "Are you done?" I nodded hesitantly. "You can say that." My realm hadn't stabilized, but the 5 qi pillars had been filled up. It could be considered done. It's good that you're done. I just contacted my eldest senior brother. Originally, I wanted to ask him to take us to play around nearby. However, after talking with him, I received an incredible piece of news. Zhang Wenfei's face was flushed and he was extremely excited. "What news?" I asked him curiously. Zhang Wenfei moved closer to me and said mysteriously, "Yi Pianpian? She's at the headquarters right now." I was dumbfounded. I thought it was some good news that would help our cultivation, but it turned out that this fellow was love-struck again. My eldest senior brother said that if there's a chance tomorrow, he'll take us to see Yi Pianpian secretly. Don't you think that's good news? Haha, my dream of many years will finally come true tomorrow. This fellow seemed to have gone crazy as he stood there and kept laughing. He was the perfect image of a lunatic. I curled my lips and was about to say something when there was a knock on the door. Only a few people from our branch would come to the headquarters to knock on the door, so Zhang Wenfei didn't hide his excitement. He stood there and laughed hysterically. But when I went to open the door, the smile on Zhang Wenfei's face suddenly froze. Then, his eyes widened to an exaggerated degree, and his mouth opened wide. Even I was shocked and couldn't help but open my eyes wide. Chapter 132. Why is she here all of a sudden? I was stunned for a long time. Before I could speak, Zhang Wenfei, who was behind me, screamed and slapped himself hard on the face. He muttered, "It must be an illusion. It must be an illusion." Yi Pianpian was startled by his reaction. She looked at us with a puzzled expression. This guy is too embarrassing. I quickly moved to block Yi Pianpian's line of sight. I asked her with a smile, "Did you come back from there?" It had been more than a month since I had left the Fire God Temple. Yi Pianpian had naturally returned long ago. Hearing my question, she retracted her gaze and glanced at me. However, she didn't mention anything about the Fire God Temple. Instead, she said faintly, "Let's talk inside." Then, she directly walked into the room. Feeling helpless, I had to step aside and follow her into the room. At this time, Zhang Wenfei was still standing there in a daze. Looking at him, I didn't dare to remind him in front of Yi Pianpian. I pointed at Yi Pianpian and said to him, "Brother Zhang, let me introduce you. This is Yi Pianpian, the Vice President of the Metaphysics Union." After saying that, I winked at him to remind him to watch his behavior. However, this guy's eyes were completely fixed on Yi Pianpian and he didn't notice my wink at all. His face was red and he rubbed his hands together. He looked like he wanted to greet me but didn't dare to. I had no choice but to point at him and introduce him to Yi Pianpian. "This is Zhang Wenfei from our Shenzhen branch. You may know his senior brother. He's Zhang Canwen, the director of the union." "Senior brother Zhang?" Yi Pianpian looked at Zhang Wenfei again and nodded. "Senior brother Zhang has mentioned you to me." "Really?" Zhang Wenfei finally spoke in a trembling voice. The shocked expression on his face finally disappeared and was replaced by surprise. At this time, I looked at Yi Pianpian in confusion. This girl was beautiful, but she was too arrogant. Most of the time, she didn't talk much. I didn't expect that after not seeing her for more than a month, she could talk more normally. Just as I was thinking about this, I saw Yi Pianpian turn to Zhang Wenfei and say, "I came to talk to Zhou Yi about something today. Can you go out for a while?" Zhang Wenfei's smile froze. After 2 seconds, he hurriedly nodded and left the room in a hurry with a face full of disappointment, leaving me standing on the side with a bitter smile. I looked at Yi Pianpian helplessly. I had misjudged her. Her temper was still as straightforward as before. She hadn't changed at all. After Zhang Wenfei went out and closed the door, I pointed at the stool next to me and asked Yi Pianpian to sit down. Then, I sat down on the bed not far from her. "What do you want?" Yi Pianpian's eyes gazed at me, giving me goosebumps. After a while, she opened her mouth. "Are you behind the true dragon's vein?" I was stunned for a moment before displeasure rose in my heart. "You've already gone to take a look yourself. All of your powers are so high, so you should have already discovered something. Why are you staring at me? What do you think I can do with my strength?" Yi Pianpian shook her head and said, "I'm talking about the true dragon's vein of the Metaphysics Association." This time, my heart suddenly shivered. Did this woman discover something? Thinking about it, it shouldn't be. She wasn't at the true dragon's vein. Zhang Wenfei didn't even notice when I was absorbing the qi of the dragon's vein these past few days, let alone the others. Why did she suddenly say that? I inexplicably felt that Yi Pianpian was a little scary. She seemed to have an innate intuition. Previously at the Fire God Temple, she insisted that I was hiding something. Although the Metaphysics Association had been interrogating us, in reality, I reckoned that the people from the association wouldn't think that we were behind it. The reason was very simple. It was the true dragon's vein. Our dragon-seeking realm Earth Masters were too weak. The possibility of us playing tricks was very small. Otherwise, the association wouldn't have let us come back to prepare for the young phoenix gathering after such a simple investigation. However, Yi Pianpian asked me as soon as she saw me. After interacting with her, I roughly knew her character. She would say whatever she wanted to say. Since she asked me that, it meant that she was very suspicious of me. I instantly became cautious. This was different from the Fire God Temple incident. I had provided the Metaphysics Association with the Fire God Temple, so it was my credit. Even if the Metaphysics Association knew that I was hiding something, they wouldn't do anything. However, if the Metaphysics Association found out that I was behind this incident, killing me would be considered a light punishment. I don't know what happened to the true dragon's vein, but I'll say it again. With my strength, what do you think I can do? You're just a young lady, so why are your thoughts so heavy? I pretended to be relaxed and said to her as if I didn't care. Yi Pianpian wasn't easily fooled by me. Instead, she looked at me with a burning gaze. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "Your strength isn't high, but I can't see through you." Can't see through me? What does that mean? Before I could understand, she changed the topic and talked about the Fire God Temple. That river is the Yellow Springs River that you mentioned. What exactly is that underwater monster? I spread my hands again. Do you think that I would know about such a terrifying thing? Yi Pianpian was probably immune to my "I don't know anything" attitude, so she didn't show any disgust on her face. She calmly said, "Vice President Yang told me last time that when you guys crossed the river together, you were at the back and even stepped on a monster's head. Yet, you weren't attacked and the monster sent you across instead. After that, you even reached out to touch it and it didn't attack you. Director Fang Xing, who was traveling with you, was killed in one hit when he reached out to touch the monster. This time, she really wronged me. I had never heard of a golden head before. As for why it didn't kill me and even gave me a dark green bead, even I thought it was weird. I was too lazy to explain, so I directly asked her, "Why were you born as a human? Why was my dog born as a dog?" Yi Pianpian was stunned and frowned. I thought she was going to get angry, but after a while, she said seriously, "It's probably because I did good deeds in my previous life, so I became a human that gathered the spirits of all living beings." I didn't know that this little girl's temper had calmed down recently. I smiled at her. That's why I guessed that it was because I did good deeds in my previous life that the monster treated me well. Why else do you think it was? Yi Pianpian glared at me and kept silent for a long time. She finally gave up on this question and stood up. It seemed that she didn't want to argue with me anymore. She directly said, "After I came back from Shenangjia a few days ago, I went to Kaifeng first. I've investigated the situation of the people who were traveling with you. I originally didn't want to force you, but the Metaphysics Association's true dragon vein has a problem. If we can't find a way to restore it in a short period of time, the Metaphysics Association won't have the patience to slowly search for a new true dragon vein. At that time, the headquarters will definitely use some special method." After saying that, she looked at me seriously and said, "I won't be the one to find you, and they won't be as polite as I am." I instantly became silent. She was right. At that time, a group of more than 10 people had all disappeared. No one knew if they were alive or dead. With the Metaphysics Association's power, it wouldn't be difficult for them to investigate this matter. Moreover, she was right. If nothing happened to the true dragon vein in the Metaphysics Association, even if they knew that I was hiding something, they would tolerate it. However, the original true dragon vein had disappeared. If we couldn't find a new true dragon vein, the Metaphysics Association's 100-year foundation would be destroyed. At this moment, the Metaphysics Association definitely wouldn't tolerate me hiding anything. After hesitating for a while, I prepared to tell Yi Piampian the truth about the Fire God Temple. The reason why I hid it from the Metaphysics Association was because the fatty's father had just gone in to save the fatty. I was worried that something might have happened. Now that more than a month had passed, the fatty would have been saved if everything had gone smoothly. There was no harm in telling her. However, before I could say anything, Yi Piampian directly walked to the door. When she reached the door, she said, "I'll give you a few more days. If you don't come and find me before the fledgling phoenix gathering ends, Lu Qinggan from the supervision office will come and find you." I subconsciously asked her, "Who's Lu Qinggan?" "You met him a few days ago when you arrived at the headquarters. Also, I wish you all the best at the fledgling phoenix gathering." With these last words, Yi Piampian closed the door behind her and left. I was stunned. Yi Piampian wished me all the best at the fledgling phoenix gathering? This girl wasn't this kind before. And that Lu Qinggan, how many days ago did I meet him? I recalled the young man with a stern face. It was most likely him. While I was thinking, the door was pushed open again. Then, Zhang Wenfei rushed in front of me and grabbed my arm with both of his hands. "Why did she come to find you? You've known Yi Piampian for a long time, haven't you? Why didn't you tell me?" I helplessly spread my arms. "I didn't tell you that I didn't know her." Zhang Wenfei glared at me. After a while, he screamed and jumped onto his bed. He looked at the ceiling in a daze and muttered, "It's over. It's the first time I've met her. I wasn't prepared at all. She must think that I'm a fool. It's over." After muttering to himself for a long time, he seemed to have thought of something and started laughing. He jumped up from the bed and threw himself next to me. He said to me with a flattering expression, "Brother Zhou, can we discuss something?" His sinister expression made me wary. I asked him suspiciously, "What is it? You're very familiar with Yi Piampian, right?" I shook my head. "I just know her." Zhang Wenfei hurriedly said, "Don't be modest. Although I've never met Yi Piampian before, I know her very well. When has she ever been so close to a man? Not to mention being in the same room as you and chatting for so long. This is absolutely unprecedented. Take Han Wennan for example. Although he's arrogant, Yi Piampian hasn't even looked him in the eye. The only time they really interacted was when he claimed that Yi Piampian was his woman and got beaten up by her." I was speechless. What did he mean by private and in the same room? After this guy's exaggeration, even I felt that my relationship with Yi Piampian wasn't normal. Zhang Wenfei said again, "Since you guys are so close, can you ask her to let me take a picture with her?" I thought about it. Although Yi Piampian was cold and arrogant, we still knew each other. It shouldn't be too much to ask for a picture with her. If I brought Zhang Wenfei to see her, she probably wouldn't refuse. However, I felt that something was wrong. I asked Zhang Wenfei, "Don't you like Yi Piampian? After I introduce you, you can just ask her out for a meal or something. Why do you want to take a picture with her? It's like chasing after a star. It's a bit weird." Zhang Wenfei smiled bitterly. "It's true that I like her, but liking her from a distance is the same as chasing after a star. The moment I was defeated by Lu Zhenyang in the competition, I had already given up. Yi Piampian is too far away for me to get close to. It's more appropriate to like her as an idol. So, do you agree to take a picture with her or not?" It seemed that he had gotten over it. I nodded. During the Young Phoenix Society, I have something to discuss with her. I'll take you with me. If nothing unexpected happens, she should agree. Zhang Wenfei was so excited that he danced with joy for a long time. Then he came over and said mysteriously, I'm sure that I have no hope, so I want to take a photo with her. But you can't give up. I think the intimacy between you two is much more promising than Han Wennan. You've defeated him in the last competition. You can't lose to Yi Piampian this time. I was stunned. What was he talking about? Why was he talking about me again? I hurried to explain, don't talk nonsense. We just… work contacts. The Metaphysics Society needs my help. Zhang Wenfei snorted at my words. Yi Piampian is so beautiful and strong. Do you dare say you don't like her? It's good that we have work contacts. That way we can slowly cultivate our relationship. When the time comes, you can take the number one beauty of our Metaphysics Society and make Han Wennan and Lu Zhenyang jealous. Haha, it feels good just thinking about it. I couldn't communicate with him anymore. I curled my lips and lay on the bed to stabilize the Tao energy in my body. Chapter 133. Early the next morning, Zhang Wenfei's senior, Zhang Canwen, suddenly came to our room. He had a full beard and looked very old, but according to Zhang Wenfei, he was only in his 30s. After all, he was a senior from our Guangdong branch. When we talked, his tone was very friendly. He was probably talking about the ranking competition. After Zhang Wenfei introduced me as Zhou Yi, he laughed and patted my shoulder. With you here, our Guangdong branch will be proud. Yi Piampian awakened 3 meridians in the previous competition. I think you're not bad either. You can also create a 3-meridian Earth Master. This guy was the same as Zhang Wenfei. He was old but still had no control over his word. I smiled wryly. A 3-meridian Earth Master? I don't even dare to think about it. I'll burn incense if I can completely awaken 1 meridian. I wasn't being modest. Not counting the 5 light pillars, I didn't even have a chance to awaken 1 meridian with my original talent. Zhang Canwen stroked his beard and reprimanded me. You're so young, but why don't you have any vigor? It's said that setting a high ambition will be a medium ambition, setting a medium ambition will be a small ambition, and setting a small ambition won't be a big ambition. If you don't even dare to set an ambition, how will you achieve it in the future? The son of the Han family has always had at least 1 meridian talent. Since you could defeat him, it proves that your talent is definitely stronger than his. I think you should at least awaken 2 meridians. If you're lucky and awaken 3 meridians, our Metaphysics Association will have 2 peerless geniuses. Haha. Talent really couldn't be calculated like that. At that time, I used the power of my eyes and the mysterious black bead to barely win against Han Wennan. In terms of talent, I really couldn't compare to him. However, although Zhang Canwen was reprimanding me, he didn't have any malicious intent. He was just encouraging me. I naturally didn't feel offended and said with a smile, then I'll reluctantly set an ambition of 2 meridians, no, 3 meridians. When I said 2 meridians, Zhang Canwen glared at me. I had no choice but to say 3 meridians. He stroked his beard to express his satisfaction. But then again, with 5 light pillars and 5 times the talent, there should be hope for 2 meridians, right? 3 meridians might also be possible. From this point of view, Zhang Canwen's estimation of my talent wasn't wrong. After chatting for a while, Zhang Canwen told Zhang Wenfei that he wanted to take him to see Yi Piampian. Unexpectedly, Zhang Wenfei glanced at him and said, I'm not going. I just saw it yesterday. I can't be bothered to watch it again today. Huh. Zhang Canwen was very surprised and asked, she just returned to the headquarters yesterday. How did you see her? Hee, you don't know about this. Zhang Wenfei glanced at me with shifty eyes, then told me about what happened last night with some embellishments. After hearing that, Zhang Canwen was stunned. After a long while, he suddenly raised his finger at me and stared at me with his huge eyes. He praised, I've heard people say that if you understand one thing, you'll understand 100 things. I didn't believe it at first, but I didn't expect it to be true. The younger generation will surpass us in time, truly surpassing us in time. This time I was speechless. I shrugged and didn't bother to explain. Then, we returned to the main topic and talked about the fledgling phoenix gathering. I suddenly remembered that my Dao Qi hadn't completely stabilized yet, so I asked him about the fledgling phoenix gathering. I wanted to know the order of the Dragon Qi baptism and whether it would be done according to the previous rankings. After all, I hadn't experienced the fledgling phoenix gathering or the Dragon Qi baptism, so it wasn't appropriate for me to speculate. It was safer to ask him, who knew that Zhang Kanwen would give me a bad answer. According to him, the fledgling phoenix gathering would only last for 2 days. On the first day, everyone would undergo the Dragon Qi baptism under the protection of the Metaphysics Association. They would open their meridians and officially reach the pressure point realm. That day was known as the fledgling phoenix cry. On the second day, people from the previous fledgling phoenix gathering would participate together. The fledgling phoenix gathering's name came from the meaning of the young phoenix is clearer than the old phoenix's voice. Therefore, after the fledgling phoenix cry, they would naturally have to challenge the old phoenix. Of course, the old phoenix only referred to the people from the previous fledgling phoenix gathering who were still in the pressure point realm. People like Yi Pianpian, who had already advanced to the glorious consciousness realm, naturally didn't count. In fact, Yi Pianpian was just an exception. In the history of the Metaphysics Association, there were very few people who had advanced 2 realms in just 3 years, so it couldn't be considered a common occurrence. Moreover, people from the current and the previous fledgling phoenix gathering were allowed to exchange pointers with each other. There were no restrictions. After all, there weren't many opportunities for all the branches in the country to gather together. It was also the Metaphysics Association's intention to use this opportunity to exchange pointers. That day was known as the fledgling phoenix spreads its wings. 2 days later, the fledgling phoenix gathering would officially end. As the branches returned, the events of the fledgling phoenix gathering would spread throughout the world. Moreover, the Metaphysics Association would also publish some publications to record the events of the fledgling phoenix gathering in detail. After listening to his detailed explanation, my expression changed. The Dragon Qi baptism would only last for 1 day. This was completely different from what I had expected. At this moment, I hadn't even stabilized my second Dao Qi pillar, and there were only 5 days left before the fledgling phoenix gathering officially began. What should I do? According to my calculations, the second light pillar would stabilize tomorrow. Even if I didn't sleep or rest, I would need at least 2 days to stabilize each light pillar. In other words, on the day of the fledgling phoenix gathering, I would only be able to stabilize 3 or 4 at most. Even if I added the first day of the fledgling phoenix gathering, I wouldn't be able to completely stabilize 5 light pillars. An unstable Dao Qi pillar wouldn't be able to undergo the dragon vein baptism. The process of the Dragon Qi baptism was to use Dao Qi to attack one's acupuncture point. An unstable Dao Qi couldn't be controlled at all. Once it was carried out recklessly, the lightest consequence would be Qi deviation. Not only would one's Dao Qi be destroyed, one would also be severely injured. This was also one of the reasons why the Metaphysics Association held the fledgling phoenix gathering every year. After all, it wasn't easy to obtain a true dragon vein. Every feng shui master who could reach this step was the Metaphysics Association's most valuable asset. The Metaphysics Association wanted to ensure that everyone could smoothly reach the acupoint ceiling realm. This was to prevent the feng shui masters of the smaller branches from having problems when they went back to attack their acupuncture point. At the fledgling phoenix gathering, with the guidance and help from the Metaphysics Association, the danger could be reduced to the minimum. What should I do? Should I just stabilize 4 Dao Qi pillars and disperse the 5th one so that I can undergo the Dragon Qi baptism at the fledgling phoenix gathering? No, I can't do that. Opening the meridians is too important. Every additional Dao Qi pillar is of great help in attacking the acupuncture point. No matter what, I can't give it up. It seems that I can only do my best and leave the rest to fate. If I can't stabilize all the Dao Qi at the fledgling Phoenix gathering, I might as well give up on the dragon vein baptism here. I'll wait until the future to complete the process. After making up my mind, I didn't slack off. As long as there was a chance, it would be best to finish it here. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what would happen if I dragged it out and messed around. After chatting with Zhang Kanwen for a while, he said that he wanted to show us around and introduce the headquarters to us. Of course, I didn't want to do that, so I tactfully rejected him. I need to stabilize my Daoqi realm. Zhang Wenfei found it strange, but he didn't say anything. He followed his senior brother alone. After they left, I immediately sat cross-legged on my bed and began to stabilize the Dao Qi in my body. For the next 5 days, I didn't even take a step out of my room. I didn't even sleep. I only did one thing every day, and that was to stabilize my Dao Qi. Fortunately, everything was peaceful these days. Nothing unexpected happened, and no one came to disturb me. Even Zhang Wenfei didn't ask anything. He just silently brought food to my room every day. After a full 5 days, I finally stabilized all 4 Dao Qi pillars on the night before the fledgling Phoenix gathering. There was only one left. In terms of time, this was already the fastest speed that I could estimate. However, this was useless. It didn't matter if I was short of 1 or 2. There wasn't enough time left. I didn't sleep or rest for 5 days. Although my body didn't feel tired with the support of the Dao Qi, my mind was exhausted. I stood up from the bed, stretched a bit, and then directly lay down to sleep. I had been burning with anxiety for the past few days. This kind of mood wasn't good for stabilizing the Dao Qi in my body. Relaxation was the way to go. Since I couldn't make it to the fledgling Phoenix gathering, I might as well take a break and adjust my mind before making any plans. However, in the middle of the night, I couldn't help but get up again. Although there wasn't enough time, my Dao Qi should be stabilized with the addition of the 2 days of the fledgling Phoenix gathering. When the time came for the Dragon Qi baptism, the Metaphysics Association would pay great attention to my talent. They might even send someone to protect me. Although I might not be able to make a name for myself at the fledgling Phoenix gathering, I wouldn't get any benefit. I am a very pragmatic person. Compared to a false reputation, personal benefits are more important. After thinking about it, I continued to work hard. The next day, when everyone set off for the fledgling Phoenix gathering, the 5th Dao Qi pillar had stabilized by about 10%. Originally, I didn't want to participate in the fledgling Phoenix gathering, but the headquarters requested that everyone attend. I had no choice but to agree. On the way to the venue with Zhang Wenfei and the others, I thought that I could continue to stabilize my Dao Qi during the fledgling Phoenix gathering. Moreover, I could watch the process of the others undergoing the Dragon Qi baptism. It would definitely be helpful to me, so it wouldn't be a waste of time. With that thought, I calmed down a lot. When we arrived at the Metaphysics Association's venue, it was still the same as the true dragon vein. There were 10 regions according to the heavenly stems, but it was different from before. The staff of the Metaphysics Association directly brought the people from the Guangdong branch to Region B. This was because the ranking was based on the number of people who had reached the Qi gathering realm. With my help at the True Dragon Vein, the 10 people from the Guangdong branch had all reached this realm. Although we were ranked last in the True Dragon Vein Observation Division, this result was even better than the previous few divisions of our branch. We were ranked first among all the branches, and there were only a total of 4 branches that reached this level. The reason why we were placed in Zone B was because our results in previous years were not as good as the others. Otherwise, we would have even had the right to sit in Zone A. After sitting down in Region B, Zhang Wenfei and the others were a little emotional. Su Shuxing said, "This year's fledgling Phoenix gathering should be our branch's highest ranking, right?" Zhang Wenfei immediately replied, "That's right." Not only is our current ranking at the top, after the fledgling Phoenix gathering is over, our branch will definitely be at the top of this year's Fledgling Phoenix Chronicles published by the Metaphysics Association. We might even be ranked first. Once he said that, the others immediately agreed. That's right. Zhou-Yi was stronger than Han Wennan previously, so his talent naturally surpassed his. Han Wennan is already the strongest among the younger generation. This time, Zhou-Yi will definitely be ranked first on the Fledgling Phoenix ranking. The title of Fledgling Phoenix Chronicles belongs to Zhou-Yi. The Fledgling Phoenix Chronicles they were talking about was a commemorative publication that the Metaphysics Association would publish and distribute to the branches after the Fledgling Phoenix gathering. It would record in detail what had happened at the Fledgling Phoenix gathering and rank each branch. Of course, individuals would also be ranked, which was what they called the Fledgling Phoenix ranking. Every year's Fledgling Phoenix ranking would receive the title of Fledgling Phoenix. The previous Fledgling Phoenix was Yi Piampian. Chapter 134. There was still one more pillar of light left. Even if I gave up on that pillar, I would still have decent talent and might even be able to enter the Rising Phoenix rankings. However, if there was a better choice, I wouldn't give up on the fifth pillar for no reason. It's just that this way, the crowd will be disappointed in me when the time comes. After thinking about it, I called out to Zhang Wenfei and decided to tell them about it. When it came to this kind of thing, they would not be so disappointed when the time came. Otherwise, they would inevitably feel sad if they were disappointed when the time came. I used a calm voice and slowly said to Zhang Wenfei, "You've seen for the past few days that I've been desperately trying to stabilize the Dao Qi in my body. However, my Dao Qi is a bit strange, and it still hasn't stabilized. I'm afraid I'll miss the Rising Phoenix gathering." What? Zhang Wenfei was stunned. After a while, he asked in disbelief, "How is that possible? Even our Dao Qi has stabilized. How could this happen to you?" With that, he continued with a worried expression, "Is there something wrong with your Dao Qi? How about I get my senior brother to take a look?" I quickly shook my head. "There's nothing wrong with my Dao Qi. I can sense it, but because my cultivation is different from ordinary people, I'll need around 2 more days to stabilize my Dao Qi. I most likely won't be able to make it for the Rising Phoenix gathering." "What should we do? Our branch is counting on you to gain face." Zhang Wenfei hastily asked. "How about we contact the headquarters and ask them to postpone the Rising Phoenix gathering for 2 more days?" As soon as he said this, even he knew it was impossible. Without waiting for my reply, he bitterly smiled. "That definitely won't work," the group discussed for a long time. In the end, everyone looked dejected. Zhang Wenfei helplessly said, "If it really doesn't work, then we can only do this. However, Zhou-Yi, you should try your best to stabilize your Dao Qi. You won't be able to make it for the Rising Phoenix gathering. As long as we're still at the headquarters, it'll be safer for you to undergo the Dragon Qi baptism." He had the same thought as I did. I nodded. "I'll try my best. I should be able to completely stabilize my Dao Qi in around 2 days." After we finished talking, Su Shuxing suddenly pointed in the distance. "Look, the people from the Yunnan branch are here." We raised our heads in astonishment. At the entrance of the venue, Bai Chiwen was brought in by the staff of the headquarters. However, what was strange was that there was no one else around him. He walked all the way into the venue alone. I turned around to check. At this moment, only the Gui area was empty. The other areas were all occupied. It seemed that Bai Chiwen was the only one in the Yunnan branch who had reached the Qi drawing realm and was qualified to participate in the Young Phoenix gathering. Although I was the one who had injured all of them that day, the result still surprised me. Of course, he was only surprised. This group of people had done the first thing, so they couldn't blame him for retaliating. They were the ones who committed the sin first, so they had to pay the price. That was fair. Haha, those shameless bastards. So what if they snatched our spots? Didn't they still end up back in Area Gue? Trash should go back to where they belong. At that moment, Bai Chiwen happened to pass by us. Su Shuxing wasn't polite and deliberately mocked him loudly. Bai Chiwen's footsteps stopped. He lifted his head to look at us. His gaze finally stopped on me. His eyes were filled with resentment, but at the same time, there was also an intense fear. It seemed that I had left a deep scar on him that day. Because of Bai Chiwen and the Yunnan branch, Su Shuxing and the others had almost ruined their futures. Even if things didn't develop to that point, they still felt resentful. After Su Shuxing finished speaking, the others also started to mock him. Bai Chiwen didn't retort. I guessed that he didn't dare to retort. After glancing at me, he immediately lowered his head and left. The members of the Guangdong branch angrily sat down, but they were still cursing the Yunnan branch. At that moment, I suddenly felt a burning gaze looking at me from the side. I subconsciously turned my head and saw Lu Zhenyang sitting not far from me. I hadn't noticed before, but it turned out that the Beijing branch was also sitting in Area B. Lu Zhenyang's gaze was sinister. When he saw me turn my head to look at him, he didn't avert his gaze. Instead, he revealed a cold and resentful smile. I found it strange. Whether it was injuring Zhang Wenfei or secretly provoking the other branches to deal with us, it was all because of his trick. Now, he was resentful towards me. It was really strange. Even if I said that he had injured Zhang Wenfei on the stage, it wasn't a big deal according to the standard of him injuring Zhang Wenfei. Moreover, we had a life and death duel. Logically speaking, he should be grateful that I didn't kill him. It was a pity that some people weren't meant to be reasonable. They only allowed themselves to deal with others. If others dared to resist, it was definitely the other party's fault. There was no need to pay attention to such people. Although the Lu family in the capital was powerful, I didn't believe that they could do anything to me in the metaphysics society. When I returned to Shenzhen, I definitely wouldn't stay in the Shenzhen branch for long. At that time, I wouldn't be afraid of him playing any tricks. This was the reason why I dared to take away his yellow and white seal artifact. Just as I turned my head to ignore him, he stood up and walked towards us. After all, he was a member of the Lu family in the capital. When the other members of the Beijing branch saw him walk over, they immediately followed behind him loyally, as if they were afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Seeing them like this, Zhang Wenfei and the others immediately stood up from their seats and stood around me. They glared at the members of the Beijing branch. Lu Zhenyang completely ignored our actions. He walked in front of me and stood still. He said to me in a sharp voice, "Zhou Yi, I was careless and was defeated by you once during the ranking competition. But don't be too happy. This is the Young Phoenix gathering. After today, I will let you know what a genius is. Also, I advise you to return my Mount Tai seal to me. Our Lu family isn't someone you can mess with." So that yellow and white seal was called the Mount Tai seal. I didn't know if it had anything to do with the Mount Tai stone. This guy was quite interesting. He didn't dare to challenge me this time, so he came to speak ruthlessly to me. I was speechless at his actions. It seemed that he was addicted to speaking ruthlessly. It was the same during the previous championship. At that time, when I had just sat down at the venue, the first person I saw was him going to speak ruthlessly to Han Wennan. It was a pity that Han Wennan only replied with a scram. I wasn't as domineering as Han Wennan. I just shook my head and smiled. What does it have to do with me whether you're a genius or not? If you want that Mount Tai seal of yours, you have to fight me to the death. If you can get it back, it's yours. You. Lu Zhenyang was instantly angry. He pointed at me and said angrily, "All right, wait if you have the guts." With that, he let out a cold snort and returned to his seat with his large group of people. After they left, Zhang Wenfei came over and said to me worriedly, "Zhou Yi, why don't you return the Mount Tai seal to him? He's the son of the Lu family." Although the artifact he has might not be as precious as Han Wunan's Heavenly Master artifact, it's definitely not ordinary. If the Liu family really wants to pursue the matter, you'll be at a disadvantage. I smiled and shook my head. Since the Liu family is a big family, they won't be so dishonest. If they want it, they can come and talk to me. I'll definitely return it to them. However, if they really want to use their power to oppress them, although I don't have a strong background, I have a body full of tough bones. But the situation is stronger than the person. Zhang Wenfei tried to persuade me again. Among the big families in the metaphysics world, ancient families like Mt. Meng's Zhang family and Qinling's Han family are still fine. They will leave some leeway. However, the Liu family is famous for being protective. They can use any method. Why do you have to fight for your honor? I shrugged and continued to smile at him. What methods can they use? At most, I'll find a deep forest to hide after I leave the Metaphysics Society. I don't believe that the Liu family can find me. Zhang Wenfei sighed helplessly after hearing what I said. In the end, he couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't that I had to take the Mount Tai seal for myself, but Liu Zhenyang was really despicable. If he came and talked to me nicely, I would definitely return it to him. However, he was still acting so arrogant. If I were to return it to him, I would despise myself. Furthermore, after hearing that the seal was called the Mount Tai seal, I was suddenly interested. After all, when I first reached the Qi gathering realm, I relied on the dragon vein energy on the Mount Tai stone. What is this Mount Tai seal? I have to find some time to study it. Very soon, President Gu of the Metaphysics Society appeared in the hall and gave a speech on the rostrum. Looking at his amiable smile, I couldn't see any signs of depression after the incident with the dragon vein. Although President Gu was the president, he didn't seem to be in charge. Just like last time, he quickly left the hall after his speech. The remaining work of the Young Phoenix Society was handled by the vice presidents of the Metaphysics Society. There were 2 vice presidents. The first one was a bald, middle-aged man. He looked cold and didn't seem to be easy to get along with. The other one was an old acquaintance of mine, Yang Shilong. Apart from the 2 of them, there were dozens of feng shui masters wearing the black robes of the Metaphysics Society that walked in. Yang Shilong and the other vice president introduced themselves to us on the rostrum. I then found out that the bald, middle-aged man was called Dan Feng. After the 2 of them finished their self-introductions, they didn't say anything else and immediately arranged for the dozens of feng shui masters to sit with our branch teams. They were to protect us during the Dragon Qi baptism. Due to the special circumstances, I had to tell Yang Shilong about my situation first. After he finished distributing the work, he happened to pass by me and I hastily called out to him. After all, we were old acquaintances and we had gone through life and death together in the Fire God Temple. Yang Shilong's expression was still amiable as he greeted me with a smile. I considered my tone and briefly told him about my situation. When I spoke, my voice wasn't low, so the people nearby could hear me. Liu Zhenyang was probably paying attention to me. After I finished, Yang Shilong frowned and didn't say anything. Liu Zhenyang stood up and said to me excitedly, "It turns out that the Dao Qi in your body hasn't stabilized yet? Then why are you still being rude to me? I'm afraid that you won't even be able to reach the pressure point realm this time. Just you wait. During the Young Phoenix Spreading Wings Challenge tomorrow, I'll look for you first. Didn't you want to have a life and death duel with me? I'll fight with you then. I'll take back my Mount Tai seal and take your life. Zhou-Yi, wash your neck clean and wait." Chapter 135. His words were exactly the same as the despicable means used by the Yunnan branch. It seemed that I didn't wrongly accuse him. Without waiting for me to speak, the hot-tempered Su Shuxing stood up, pointed at Liu Zhenyang and cursed, "You are too shameless. Just now, when Zhou-Yi asked you to fight a life-and-death duel, you were so scared that you didn't dare to say a word. Now that you heard that Zhou-Yi can't advance to the pressure point realm for the time being, you immediately became cocky. It's rare to see someone as shameless as you. Lu Zhenyang didn't get angry at this time. He just stared at Su Shuxing condescendingly and said disdainfully, "Tomorrow is the young phoenix spreading wings gathering to learn from each other. What's wrong with me saying that I want to learn from Zhou-Yi? If you don't accept it, I will also learn from you tomorrow." You. Su Shuxing was furious and pointed at Lu Zhenyang, speechless. "Shut up." At this time, Yang Shilong finally couldn't listen anymore and scolded loudly. "In public, you are all young and promising feng shui masters, but you are all cursing like shrews. Where is your sense of propriety?" After all, he was the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. Even Lu Zhenyang didn't dare to say anything more. He sneered at me and then sat down. After the storm subsided, Yang Shilong frowned and asked me, "Logically speaking, after absorbing enough dragon vein qi, the Tao qi in your body can be stabilized in at least 3 to 10 days. Why are you different from others?" This problem couldn't be explained. After thinking for a while, I had no choice but to make up a reason. Previously, I offended the people of Miaojiang and got poisoned. I haven't recovered yet. Every time it acts up, my blood will boil and my Tao qi will be chaotic. Usually, it doesn't affect me, but during the period of stabilizing my Tao qi, I often get half the result with twice the effort. That's why I'm slowing down. I wasn't talking nonsense. The Qilin tattoo on my chest was still there, and the Qilin image had become more and more obvious as the Tao qi in my body increased. Originally, I didn't want others to know about the Qilin gu, but Yang Shilong's question was suspicious. I was worried that after the Metaphysics Association found out, they would link this to the disappearance of the dragon vein. That was why I had to use the Qilin gu as a shield. Gu poison? Yang Shilong's expression immediately changed when he heard this. He pondered for a while before nodding and saying, "If it's the effect of the gu poison, then it makes sense. How about this, you wait for a moment. After I make arrangements for the others, I'll check on your condition and see if there's anything I can do." His words moved me and I thanked him. Back then, that old gu woman was extremely strong and the Qilin gu was very strange, so I didn't have much hope at all. However, Yang Shilong was the vice president and had the strength of glory of consciousness realm. Even if he couldn't get rid of the gu poison, it would be good if he could recognize what the Qilin gu was. Yang Shilong nodded and went to arrange for everyone to undergo the dragon vein baptism. After he left, I glanced at the branch in the capital. I was a little worried. Lu Zhenyang was definitely not joking. Since he said so, he would definitely challenge me tomorrow. However, I would still be in the dragon-seeking realm tomorrow, while he had already advanced to the acupuncture point realm. How could I compete with him? Am I supposed to avoid it? Just as I thought about it, I shook my head. I definitely couldn't avoid it. I might be able to find an excuse to leave, but the members of the Guangdong branch had to participate. If I didn't appear then, he would definitely find someone to vent his anger on. What should I do? After thinking for half a day, I didn't have any good ideas. Maybe I could only hope that I could stabilize the last pillar of energy in my body before tomorrow. While I was thinking, everyone in the hall had finished their preparations, including the members of the Guangdong branch. They all sat cross-legged on the praying mats that the Metaphysics Society had prepared beforehand. They closed their eyes and concentrated, preparing to undergo the dragon vein baptism. At that moment, Yang Shilong came to my side again and brought me to a spot far away from the others. After ensuring that I wouldn't affect the others, he asked me, "Tell me the symptoms of the gu poison." Symptoms? I really couldn't explain it. I thought for a while and decided to lift my shirt. Yang Shilong was shocked when he saw my action. When he saw the Kirin gu on my chest, he was stunned. His eyes lit up as he stared at me. I thought that he couldn't tell that it was a gu poison, so I prepared to explain it to him. However, before I could say anything, Yang Shilong seemed to suddenly understand. He took a deep breath and asked me, "This is the Kirin Gu?" I wasn't scared by his appearance. Instead, I was excited because he recognized the gu poison. I quickly asked him, "Chairman Yang, have you heard of this Kirin Gu? Do you know how to cure it?" Yang Shilong's face was solemn. After a moment of silence, he lifted his head and looked at me. He sighed and shook his head. "I can't cure it." "Can't cure it? How could it not be cured? Everything in this world has its own counter. No matter how overbearing this gu poison is, it shouldn't be incurable." I quickly asked, "Chairman Yang, what do you mean by that?" Yang Shilong sighed again. "Once the Kirin Gu is planted, the host will become the Kirin Gu. How can there be a cure?" Then, he looked at me with pity. That expression was as if he was looking at a criminal sentenced to death. It made my heart go cold. "Chairman Yang, I don't really understand. Can you explain it in detail?" Yang Shilong sat down on the stool at the side and said, "I don't really understand the specifics, but I've heard that the Kirin Gu is one of the two great ancestral gu in Miaojiang. It's not just a gu, it's also an ancient cultivation method in Miaojiang. Rumor has it that the person who raises the Kirin Gu has to find a cultivation genius to plant the gu. The gu inside the body will grow stronger as one's cultivation deepens. Using us feng shui masters as an example, in the dragon-seeking realm, the Kirin Gu will grow horns. In the acupuncture point realm, the Kirin Gu will grow scales. In the glorious consciousness realm, the Kirin Gu will grow auspicious clouds under its feet. In the end, when the person with the gu reaches the heavenly master realm, he will turn into a fully grown Kirin Gu. At that time, the person who planted the gu will be able to reach the heavenly master realm." In ancient times, many people in Miaojiang used this method to cultivate. To cultivate this method, they needed to find a suitable host for the gu. Thus, most of the gu cultivators in Miaojiang traveled thousands of miles to the Central Plains and harmed a large number of young geniuses. Later, the Heavenly Master Realm seniors of the Central Plains Taoism, Buddhism, and our Metaphysics Association were enraged. They joined hands to attack Miaojiang and destroyed all the ancestral gu in the old Miaojiang village. From then on, the power of the Miaojiang people greatly decreased. The two great ancestral gu disappeared without a trace, never to appear again. I was stunned and subconsciously muttered, "The Kirin Gu is actually that famous?" Yang Shilong nodded and said with mixed emotions, "Yes, this matter is very famous in the history of metaphysics. Many people have heard about it, but there hasn't been any news of the ancestral gu for many years. Who did you offend to make one of the two great ancestral gu reappear?" "Who? I didn't know who that old gu woman was. I was confused from the beginning to the end. First, it was Zhaoing. I didn't have the intention to kill her, but the snake spirit swallowed the mother gu and killed Zhaoing. Then, it was that old gu woman. It was nothing at first, but when she saw the snake spirit, she went crazy and used that bloody and disgusting method to plant the Kirin Gu on me. However, when I thought of the snake spirit, I suddenly remembered that the old gu woman called the snake spirit Dragon Gu. I thought for a while and asked Yang Shilong, among the two great ancestral gu, what is the other ancestral gu besides the Kirin Gu? Yang Shilong's answer was just as I thought. It was the Dragon Gu. Is the snake spirit also an ancestral gu? But its body is a snake, which is completely different from what Yang Shilong said. I had many questions in my heart, but I didn't ask about the Dragon Gu. The topic returned to the Kirin Gu. After carefully thinking about Yang Shilong's words, I asked him again, since the Kirin Gu changes according to the person's cultivation, if the person stops cultivating, the Kirin Gu won't be able to grow anymore, right? What's more, after reaching the Heavenly Master Realm, the person will turn into the Kirin Gu. Since ancient times, how many cultivators have reached the Heavenly Master Realm? I guess there aren't many people in history who have successfully grown a fully grown Kirin Gu, right? Yang Shilong shook his head again and sighed. It's not as simple as you say. The Kirin Gu has a time limit. Every 3 years, if the person's realm doesn't increase, the Kirin Gu will gradually harden and leave your body to find another host. You have to know that after the Kirin Gu is planted, it will be connected to your blood, and its roots will even be in your heart. If the Kirin Gu leaves, it means that you're dead. Is it really like what he said? Is there really no cure for the Kirin Gu? My complexion worsened. Yang Shilong continued, as for the second question, I'm not too sure. However, according to the rumors, before the Kirin Gu's poison takes effect, it can continuously improve the talent of the person who is poisoned. It's actually very helpful for cultivation. Of course, helping the person is actually helping itself. If the person is already talented, with the help of the Kirin Gu, there's still hope for him to reach the Heavenly Master realm. I was even more confused. After reaching the Heavenly Master realm, won't the person who is poisoned die? Then, why would he spend so much effort to increase his realm? In the end, it's all for someone else's benefit? Yang Shilong finally said the first piece of information that was beneficial to me. According to the rumors, the only way to get rid of the Kirin Gu is to use the Heavenly Master Sword to cut off the Kirin Gu in your body the moment you become a Heavenly Master. However, after cutting it off, your Heavenly Master realm will also be cut off. Those who can reach the Heavenly Master realm aren't young. After losing their realm, they won't be able to live for long. If that's the case, what's the difference between getting rid of the Kirin Gu and not getting rid of it? The reason why I said that there's no way to get rid of it is because of this. Of course, this is just my opinion as an outsider. If you're really poisoned by such a strange Gu, you'll die either way. You have to find a way to survive, so you can only cultivate with all your might. After listening to his explanation, I was close to despair. Just like what he said, whether I cultivate or not, I'll have to face death sooner or later. As for finding a way to survive, not to mention how difficult it was to cultivate to the Heavenly Master realm, even if I reached that realm and successfully cut off the Kirin Gu, I would only be struggling at death's door. All my cultivation would be taken away by the Kirin Gu. What's the difference between living and dying? That's too cruel. My voice was hoarse and low. It was extremely unpleasant to listen to. I asked Yang Shilong, President Yang, is there really no other way? Yang Shilong was silent for a while. His expression was slightly hesitant. Then, he said, I've heard people say that before you reach the Heavenly Master realm, you can find a senior in the Heavenly Master realm to help and use the Heavenly Master Sword to cut off the Kirin Gu. However, that would affect the cultivation of the senior in the Heavenly Master realm, so this method is almost impossible. Apart from that, I've never heard of any other methods. After saying that, he looked at me with even more pity. As for me, I could only smile bitterly. I had never even seen a senior in the Heavenly Master realm, let alone asking him to help me at the risk of affecting his own cultivation. How was that possible? There was no difference between having such a method and not having such a method. After that, Yang Shilong consoled me with something else, but I didn't hear it clearly. In the end, I returned to my seat in a daze and sat down again. I raised my head blankly and looked at the surrounding people who were working hard to undergo the Dragon Chi baptism. I suddenly lost interest in cultivation. At the end of cultivation, all my power would be used to benefit others. What was the point of that? Yang Shilong said that I had to find a way to seek life in death, but I didn't think so. Between death and living a life worse than death, I would rather choose death. But I wasn't willing to give up. Fatty was still in the Fire God Temple, and I didn't know if he was alive or dead. Red Shadow and I had agreed to meet again in the future. My parents were also at home, hoping that I could bring honor to my ancestors. How could I die? I sat there lifelessly. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the despair in my heart gradually dissipated. Slowly, a firm conviction rose up in my heart. There were 50 Dian numbers, but there was still one that could escape. How could everything be so absolute? Just like the Tao Qi in my body, could Yang Shilong and the rest imagine that I had 5 Tao Qi light pillars? He obviously couldn't. Moreover, I was still far away from the heavenly master realm. According to Yang Shilong's 3 years, I had at least 9 years to think about solving this problem. Not only that, according to my deduction, Red Shadow had agreed to meet me during the glory of consciousness. I didn't know Red Shadow's realm, but I believed that she would definitely be able to help me. Since that was the case, why should I be disheartened now? Didn't Yang Shilong say that the Kirin Gu would change as one's cultivation increased? I wanted to see what would happen to the Kirin Gu when my 5 Tao Qi light pillars advanced to the acupoint sealing stage. Chapter 136. After immersing myself in cultivation, the morning quickly passed. At noon, I heard a loud cheer from my surroundings, waking me up from my tranquil cultivation. What's going on? I turned my head and looked around. The people of the Guangdong branch were cheering in low voices. After asking around, He Bo, who I had helped at the True Dragon Vein, told me, just now, Vice President Yang announced on the platform that it's past noon. Seeing his excited expression, I didn't understand and asked him again. He said doubtfully, it's past noon, but Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing are still undergoing the Dragon Qi baptism. After hearing his words, I finally understood. The longer the Dragon Qi baptism lasted, the more meridians would be opened. Previously, Zhang Wenfei had told me that Yi Pianpian had taken a full day and a half to complete the Dragon Qi baptism at the last Rising Phoenix gathering. This was the first time in history that the Metaphysics Association's Young Phoenix Cry Day had lasted until midnight. The noon that He Bo had mentioned had a special meaning. As long as one could endure until then, they could open a complete meridian and become a one-meridian Earth Master. We didn't dare to think about a peerless genius like Yi Pianpian, but a one-meridian Earth Master was a dividing line. If you could reach this realm, it meant that you were a genius. If you couldn't reach this realm, you wouldn't be able to make much progress in the path of metaphysics. Since Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing hadn't woken up yet, it meant that our Guangdong branch might have 2 one-meridian Earth Masters this year. No wonder they were so excited. I felt a little strange. I wasn't surprised that Zhang Wenfei had the talent to become a one-meridian Earth Master. After all, he came from a famous clan. His senior brother, Zhang Kanwen, was rumored to have the talent to surpass one meridian. However, Su Shuxing had the potential to reach one meridian as well. I was overjoyed. At first, Su Shuxing and I got to know each other through a conflict, but later on I had a good impression of him. He was an honest man. Although he offended people easily, once you became friends with him, he would definitely treat you wholeheartedly. His personality made it easy for him to offend people. Previously I was worried about him, but now it seemed that if he could open his meridians for an entire day, he would be a genius. Even if he was a little brash, it wouldn't matter. At least in our Guangdong branch, everyone would have to give him some face. Originally, I was worried that my inability to undergo the Dragon Qi baptism would affect the Guangdong branch's honor. Now, it seemed that even without me, the 2 of them would be enough to make our Guangdong branch famous in the Rising Phoenix gathering. Compared to Yi Pianpian, a first vein Geomaster might not be much. However, in reality, there were only 20 to 30 people who managed to reach this realm in every Rising Phoenix gathering. On average, there was less than 1 quota for each branch. Cultivation in. In myself in, I had in the most in. By. And I and in. In. I from. The one with the best result was Zhang Wenfei's senior brother, Zhang Kanwen. At that time, he had opened 1.5 meridians, which made him a 1 meridian Earth Master. Although the process of the Dragon Chi baptism was usually calculated using the entire meridian, in fact, Dao Qi attacked the acupoints and opened them. It was only when all the acupoints in the meridian were opened that it could be considered a meridian. Therefore, it wouldn't be a whole number for every person. Some people would open half a meridian or 1.5 meridian. However, there were different ways of saying half a meridian. Could be divided into full half and less than half. The less than half meridian could only be calculated according to the acupoints, but the full half was different. In the metaphysical world, there was a saying about this realm: full half is a change. It meant that the full half was a change. Since it was called a change, it meant that half an acupoint could become a whole meridian in the future. Therefore, people like Zhang Kanwen, who had 1.5 meridian, were also called quasi-2 meridians. While the surrounding people were excitedly discussing how far Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing could go, I stopped them and asked them about their situation. This made me very happy. Among the 7 people in the branch, 3 of them had opened half of their acupoint. In other words, besides Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing, there were 3 more quasi-1 meridian Earthmasters in the Guangdong branch. This is a huge surprise. It means that among the 3 of them, there might be a new earthly master of 1 vein appearing. At that time, the records of our generation might change to 3, 4, or even 5 earthly masters of 1 vein. This kind of result could even be compared to the Hunan and Shaanxi branches. While I was happy, Hebo expressed his gratitude to me again. He said that if it wasn't for my help at the true dragon vein, let alone reaching the quasi-1 meridian, he might not even have been able to participate in the Young Phoenix gathering today. I accepted their thanks with a smile. There was nothing to decline. Help in cultivation was different from other things. Increasing their innate talent would have a huge impact on their entire lives. It was normal for them to express their gratitude to me. Next, I followed the other members of the branch and paid attention to the situation of the other branches. At this time, the branches that were still undergoing the Dragon Chi baptism had the most people. The Hunan and Shaanxi branches still had half of their members left. The other branches with the most people were the capital, Jiangsu, Jiangxi, Shandong, and our Guangdong branches. The capital and Jiangxi branches each had 3 people, while the rest had 2. This number was pretty much what everyone had expected. In previous years, this was basically the same situation. The only one that was unexpected was our Guangdong branch. In previous years, we only had 1 person. Just our few branches alone have a total of 22 people, and the other branches behind us only have a total of 10 people. Moreover, they are scattered among the 10 branches, and each branch only has 1 person. Apart from that, there were a dozen branches that were ranked at the bottom. No one had lasted until now. Everyone had already woken up. What was unexpected was that the Yunnan branches by Chiwen was among the last 10 people. The Yunnan branch had always been ranked at the bottom. If they could produce a 1 vein Earth Master this year, it would be a miracle. It seemed that replacing the ranking of the true dragon veins had brought them great benefit. Although I was displeased, I had already taught him a lesson. It was his good fortune to be able to heal his injuries and open a complete meridian before observing the true dragon veins. At this time, Vice President Yang Shilong walked up to the rostrum and softly announced the number of people who were still immersed in the Dragon Chi baptism. There were 32 people. This was the highest number in the history of the Young Phoenix Union. Those who hadn't woken up couldn't say for sure that they would be able to open a meridian, but there was a 90% chance that they would succeed. It was almost foreseeable that we would create a new record in the history of the Young Phoenix Union. Of course, this was only history. Yi Pianpian's record of opening 3 meridians would be very difficult to be broken. After announcing this news, Yang Shilong announced that those who had woken up could go eat lunch and rest first. They could gather here in the afternoon. However, everyone's thoughts were focused on their companions who had the possibility of becoming a one-vein Earth Master. No one was willing to give up on this historical moment. Even the branch members at the end of the line didn't stay far away, even though their own branch members had woken up. This afternoon was perhaps the most exciting moment of the Young Phoenix Union. It would also be the biggest topic of discussion for others in the future. No one was willing to give up on this chance to join in the fun. Zhang Wenfei and Su Shuxing still hadn't woken up by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This made us even more excited. At this time, we could basically confirm that they would definitely become a one-vein Earth Master. Following the awakening of the only member of the Anhui Metaphysics Association, the first one-vein Earth Master of this year's Metaphysics Association was officially born. In an instant, everyone in the Anhui Metaphysics Association, including the other associations, cheered in unison. Their eyes shone as they looked at the skinny young man who had just woken up. His eyes were still filled with confusion. The young man looked confused at first, as if he didn't understand why he had suddenly become the center of attention. Then, when he came back to his senses, his face flushed red and his chest heaved up and down intensely. His emotions were clearly expressed in his word. He looked a little unsteady, but at this time no one laughed at him. Becoming a one-vein Earth Master was an incomparably great honor. To the people of the metaphysics world, this was like the imperial examinations. Becoming a one-vein Earth Master was equivalent to passing the imperial examinations and having the qualifications to advance in the future. Apart from Han Wennan, Zhang Kunlun, and a few other exceptional geniuses who didn't care about this honor, everyone else had to maintain the most basic level of respect for this honor. Even Yang Shilong, who was standing on the rostrum, had a look of praise and sorrow in his eyes. It was as if he was recalling his past. After this young man, more and more people woke up. It seemed that the luck of this batch wasn't bad. None of those who woke up failed. All of them had opened a complete meridian. On the Guangdong branch's side, the first to wake up was Su Shuxing. Just like the young man from the Anhui branch, after Su Shuxing woke up, he was slightly confused. Then, he stood up with a flushed face. He was so excited that he opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. Everyone from the branch went forward to congratulate him. I was no exception. However, when I congratulated him, Su Shuxing also expressed his gratitude towards me. Previously, at the True Dragon Vein, I had also helped him. However, at that time, he had the ability to absorb enough Dragon Vein Qi. It was just that time was tight and I was worried that the matter with the jade bracelet would be exposed, so I took the initiative to help him with the last step. It wasn't easy to explain the process, so I could only smile and accept his gratitude. In the next 4 hours, the people from the other branches woke up one after another. All of them had opened one meridian. After 2 hours, only Zhang Kunlun, Han Wennan, Lu Zhenyang, and a few others were left. What made us excited was that Zhang Wenfei still hadn't woken up. At this moment, according to previous experiences, the remaining people could possibly open 2 meridians. Everyone from the Guangdong branch wasn't just excited, they were also nervous. Everyone was praying for Zhang Wenfei in their hearts, hoping that he could persevere and reach 2 meridians. That would create a new record for the Guangdong branch. The people from the Hunan branch, Shaanxi branch, and the capital branch were just like us. They were also extremely nervous. The previous cheers had already disappeared. Everyone stood there with an anxious expression. From time to time, they would look at their watches and silently calculate the possibility of opening 2 meridians. Finally, at 5:15 p.m., Zhang Wenfei was the first to open his eyes. Everyone from the Guangdong branch was shocked. They immediately went forward to look at him. However, Zhang Wenfei had just woken up. His face was still covered in sweat. It was obvious that the process of the Dragon Qi baptism wasn't easy for him. Zhang Wenfei didn't say anything. However, the black-robed old man that Yang Shilong had sent to our branch took out a stone-like object and walked over to Zhang Wenfei to place his hand on it. After one meridian, one wouldn't be able to see the exact situation with the naked eye. Even Yang Shilong, who had the highest cultivation here, couldn't do it. He had to use a magic tool to check. The stone-like object in the black-robed old man's hand was a magic tool that the Metaphysics Association used to test for opening meridians. It was called the acupoint probing stone. This magic tool was made from a special ore called the Dao magnet. Although it was called a magic tool, it didn't actually need a feng shui master to nurture it. It could be used after a simple process. Correspondingly, its function was very simple. It could only be used to test the number of meridians opened after the Dragon Qi baptism. Zhang Wenfei took a deep breath and placed his right hand on the black-robed old man's acupoint probing stone with an excited expression. In an instant, a faint layer of light mist floated out from the dark gray stone. Following the appearance of the mist, a faint black mark appeared on the mist. It was as if someone had used a brush to lightly draw it. "One meridian," someone said excitedly in a low voice. This ink line marked the open meridians in the body of a feng shui master. Every ink line was a meridian. If one stared at the ink line carefully, they could see the small nodes on it. These small nodes were the acupoints in the meridians. After a whole line of ink appeared, a second faint line of ink was about to appear. If this ink line appeared, it meant that Zhang Wenfei had opened 2 meridians. Black dots appeared one after another on the ink lines, and the ink marks connecting the dots became clearer and clearer. Chapter 137. Everyone was waiting for the first 2 Vein Earth Master to appear in this year's Young Phoenix gathering. I stood to the side and silently prayed for Zhang Wenfei. However, when I saw how he had attracted everyone's attention, I felt a faint sense of envy, as well as disappointment. There wasn't enough time to stabilize the last beam of light. Moreover, I had wasted a lot of time because I knew about the Kirin Gu. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to activate the Dragon Qi baptism within 2 days of the Young Phoenix gathering. As I sighed in my heart, the second ink line on the aperture exploring stone became more obvious. The number of nodes on it had reached 8. In the 8 extraordinary meridians, although the number of acupoints on each meridian was different, there were roughly 10. Furthermore, the acupoints in feng shui were slightly different from TCM. In fact, the number of acupoints on each meridian was indeed 10. The 8 nodes on the second ink line meant that 8 acupuncture points had been opened in the second meridian. He was only 2 more acupuncture points away from becoming a 2-meridian Earth Master. However, just as everyone thought that Zhang Wenfei would reach 2 meridians, the second ink line suddenly faded. At the same time, the 8 nodes didn't change. No new nodes appeared. After another minute, the second ink line finally disappeared completely. Everyone sighed at the same time, their voices filled with regret. 1 meridian and 8 acupuncture points. Just 2 more to open 2 meridians. It was a huge regret. When Yang Shilong stood on the platform and officially announced Zhang Wenfei's result, many people's gazes shifted from him to Lu Zhenyang, Zhang Kunlun, and Han Wennan, who were still in a daze. All the members of the Guangdong branch looked dispirited. Even I felt gloomy. Zhang Wenfei's biggest wish was to defeat Han Wennan and the other so-called geniuses. He failed in the ranking competition. I thought that he would get what he wanted in the Young Phoenix gathering, but I didn't think that he would still end up like this. Geniuses were geniuses in the end. After the black-robed old man packed his things and left, the people of the Guangdong branch and I went to congratulate Zhang Wenfei. At the same time, we expressed our regret. Hearing our sadness, Zhang Wenfei smiled and said, "There's nothing to be regretful about. My goal was to open 1 meridian. Who knew that I would reach 2 meridians in the end? It's even better than my eldest Shixiao. I'm very satisfied with this result." His words surprised me. It seemed that he had recovered from his previous mentality of wanting to compete with Han Wennan no matter what. I was gratified. After Zhang Wenfei rested for a while, he came over to ask me about the situation. I smiled wryly and said, "I'm afraid that 2 days isn't enough. We can only take one step at a time." Han Wenfei nodded and said, "Don't panic, we have to wait for the safest time to undergo the dragon aura baptism. After all, we won't be leaving immediately after the Young Phoenix gathering. We just have to hurry before we leave the Metaphysics Association." I nodded, but my heart was a little gloomy. The Metaphysics Association had treated me as a genius before, but now that Yang Shilong knew about the Kirin Gu in my body, everything had changed. From Yang Shilong's point of view, I was already a dead man. No matter how talented I was, I had no value to the Metaphysics Society. No, I still have one last bit of value, which is the true dragon vein in the Fire God Temple. After exchanging pleasantries with Zhang Wenfei, the two of us returned our gaze to Han Wenan's group of 3, just like everyone else. Although I was curious about their final outcome, it wasn't as important as stabilizing the Tao energy in my body. I calmed my mind, closed my eyes, and continued to immerse myself in the cultivation of stabilizing my Tao Qi. I only left a bit of my spirit to pay attention to the movements around me. Out of my expectation, the first one to wake up was Han Wennan. I thought that Lu Zhenyang, who had the worst talent, had his eyes closed and didn't seem to be waking up. After being awakened by the surrounding people, I looked at Han Wennan with curiosity. How many meridians could this fellow, who was known as the number 1 of the younger generation, open? He didn't spend much more time than Zhang Wenfei. From this point of analysis, he should only have about 2 meridians. When the black-robed elder in charge of the branch tested him with an aperture exploring stone, the result was similar to my analysis, but I was still shocked. It wasn't because of his talent, but because his talent was a little weak. 1 meridian and 8 acupoints. Although he took longer than Zhang Wenfei, the final result was the same as Zhang Wenfei's. Strictly speaking, 1 meridian and 8 acupoints wasn't a bad result even for the Qinling Han family. However, Zhang Kunlun and Lu Zhenyang hadn't woken up yet, and even Zhang Wenfei had reached this level. As the legitimate son of the Qinling Han family, his result was much more mediocre. The people from the Shangxi branch obviously thought of this. They didn't even cheer, but their expressions were as gloomy as Han Wennan's. Correspondingly, although the people from the Hunan branch and the Beijing branch did not laugh out loud, both groups of people were beaming with joy, and their faces were filled with unconcealable joy. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei was also a little emotional. After seeing me wake up, he nodded and sighed. "He's the same as me." "Yeah." I nodded. "You've probably caught up to him. How about it? Do you suddenly have feelings for Yi Piampian?" As soon as I mentioned Yi Piampian, Zhang Wenfei turned around and glared at me, snappily saying, "You still have the nerve to say that? The two of you are so attached to each other, how could I have feelings for you? Moreover, you didn't participate in the Young Phoenix gathering. If you did, we wouldn't have anything to do with it." He was quite confident in me. I casually asked him what to ask. This guy's logic was very simple. He said that I was the strongest among them, so it was natural that I would be the strongest in the Young Phoenix gathering. I gave him an example, saying that he couldn't beat Han Wennan before, but now his talent was the same. Zhang Wenfei was obviously dissatisfied with my example. After a moment of silence he said, "You're different from us." He was right, I was indeed different from them. I had 5 light pillars, how many meridians could I open? My heart was filled with anticipation. 2 hours after Han Wennan woke up, the sky had already darkened and the lights in the hall were lit up. Zhang Kunlun and Lu Zhenyang finally moved. This time, the person who woke up surprised me again. Zhang Kunlun was the first to wake up, while Lu Zhenyang was the last. The black-robed old man in charge of the Hunan branch, went over to check with an acupoint probing stone and found that Zhang Kunlun had opened 2 meridians and 2 acupoints. He was also the first true 2-meridian Earth Master in this young Phoenix gathering. This result was enough for anyone to be proud of, not to mention that he had surpassed the old man and Han Wennan. Zhang Kunlun had no reason to be unhappy. However, this guy had always been smiling when he reminded Fatty. At this moment I couldn't tell that he was very happy. He just humbly chatted with the people around him. After the commotion came to an end, everyone's eyes were fixed on Lu Zhenyang. Although he was one of the geniuses that everyone knew, no one had believed that he would be the last one. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a dark horse. At this moment, the people of the capital branch didn't have to worry about anything and couldn't stop smiling. Each of them had a proud expression as they looked at Lu Zhenyang. In my heart, I felt somewhat gloomy. This guy wasn't a good person. Moreover, he and I had already become enemies. The higher his talent was, the more dangerous it would be for me in the future. I had never thought of myself as a bad person, but at this moment I couldn't help but pray that this guy would wake up soon. At this moment the sky was already dark. Yi Pianpian of the previous young Phoenix gathering had only lasted until the second day. Looking at Lu Zhenyang's appearance, he was going to break Yi Pianpian's record. I couldn't understand how such a frivolous and pompous guy could have such great talent. No matter how I looked at it, Han Wennan and Zhang Kunlun were stronger than him. It didn't make sense. Zhang Wenfei, who was standing next to me, also wore a displeased expression. He sighed and said, "In the past few years, it's been said in our metaphysics world that some rising clans, such as the Lu family, have surpassed the ancient clans. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought that the rising clans wouldn't be able to reach the level of the ancient clans without accumulating for 100 years. But now, it seems that the rising clans have taken away their luck. After this young Phoenix gathering, the Lu family's reputation and status will definitely rise." What he said made sense. Although the young Phoenix gathering was only a group of young people, no matter how talented they were, their strength had only just reached the acupuncture point realm. However, this was a sign that foreshadowed the future of these young people in the next few decades. Many things could be seen from the small young Phoenix gathering, which families would decline and which families would rise. Luck is a very strange thing. Many people who believe in science might think that it's nonsense, but a feng shui master like me has no doubts about it. This kind of thing existed objectively. From the geomancer's point of view, luck was innate. It was something that was formed when the 3 souls gathered in the mother's womb. It was very difficult to change after birth. And this kind of thing that was difficult to change after birth was called heaven's will. Liu Bang of the Han dynasty and Ming dynasty's first emperor. Before these two started their armies, no one dared to predict that they would become emperors in the future. But when they started from scratch and walked step by step, everyone was dumbfounded. Looking at their history, one could see all kinds of schemes. But besides that, everyone had to admit that the two of them were blessed by heaven's will. Perhaps the Lu family's prosperity was also due to heaven's will. Lu Zhenyang was originally an arrogant person. Once he obtained the title of Young Phoenix, he would become even more arrogant. Yesterday, he had threatened me in front of everyone. Now, it seemed that he wouldn't let me go. I closed my eyes and didn't pay attention to his situation. Instead, I tried my best to stabilize the Tao energy in my body. After leaving the Metaphysics Union, if Lu Zhenyang wanted to deal with me, I couldn't afford to offend him. But in the Metaphysics Union, I had nowhere to hide. Especially at the Young Phoenix gathering tomorrow, if Lu Zhenyang really wanted to deal with me like he said, I would have to face him head-on. Dragon seeking against acupoint ceiling. With a difference of 1 realm, the chances of winning were too low. Even if I had that strange dark green energy, I didn't have much confidence. I could only hope that I could stall until my Tao energy completely stabilized. At that time, I would have a reason to undergo the Dragon Chi baptism. After the Dragon Chi baptism, even if I could only open half of my meridians, with that dark green energy, it would be enough to deal with Lu Zhenyang. Not long after I immersed myself in stabilizing my Tao energy, Lu Zhenyang finally moved. His body slightly swayed and he slowly opened his eyes. Just like everyone else, when he first woke up, his eyes were filled with confusion. However, when the other members of the branch swarmed over and told him the good news that he was the last one to wake up, this fellow immediately raised his head and laughed. He looked around in high spirit. He first looked at Han Wennan, then turned back to look at me. His eyes were filled with pride, just like a peacock with its tail raised to the sky. Han Wennan, I was wondering why you didn't compete with me at the Young Phoenix gathering. So you already knew that your talent wasn't as good as mine, right? Haha, 1 meridian and 8 acupoints, the dignified Qinling Han family's legitimate son. Haha, I'm dying of laughter. Just like how he had threatened me yesterday, he didn't give Han Wennan any face and arrogantly mocked him in front of the members of the Metaphysics Union. Han Wennan still looked honest, but his face had darkened. After a long silence, he said in a low and muffled voice, "If you want to compete with me, we'll see what happens at the Young Phoenix gathering tomorrow." Compared to the cool, get lost from before, Han Wennan was suppressing his anger and his imposing manner was much weaker. Lu Zhenyang didn't care about him anymore. He turned to me with a sinister smile and said, "And you, Zhou, wash your neck clean and wait for me tomorrow." After arrogantly threatening me again, he called the black-clothed old man from the Metaphysics Union over and placed his hand on the acupoint probing stone. Before his talent was officially tested, I still had a glimmer of hope. But when the 2 ink lines and 5 points lit up on the acupoint probing stone, my last glimmer of hope was shattered. 2 meridians and 5 acupoints, 2 meridians and half, he was already at the quasi-3rd meridian level. He was only 1 step behind Yi Pianpian. In the history of the Metaphysics Union, he would only be ranked 2nd behind Yi Pianpian. In an instant, the entire venue was filled with deafening cheers. Besides the Shaanxi branch and our Guangdong branch, everyone else who didn't have a grudge against him smiled and cheered loudly. No one wanted to have a grudge against a quasi-3rd meridian genius. Moreover, this genius came from the Lu family, which was known as the number 1 family in metaphysics. Even Yang Shilong, who was standing on the rostrum, was flushed. He excitedly announced to the crowd, "Lu Zhenyang of the Beijing branch, quasi-3rd meridian, this year's Young Phoenix." Chapter 138. Amidst Lu Zhenyang's arrogant laughter, the first day of the fledgling Phoenix assembly came to an end. Han Wennan was the first to leave with the members of the Shaanxi branch. I was the second to leave with the members of the Guangdong branch. However, when we reached the outside of the assembly, I told Zhang Wenfei to leave with the others while I stayed behind. I sat on a hidden seat outside the assembly and closed my eyes. After calming myself down, I continued to stabilize the Tao energy in my body. Very quickly, people started to leave the assembly. After everyone had left, Yang Shilong and the other vice president, Dan Feng, brought the people from the headquarters out of the assembly. I hastily stood up to greet them. "Uncle Yang, I have something to tell you." I walked in front of Yang Shilong and said with a smile. Yang Shilong frowned and hesitated for a moment before turning around to speak to the people from the headquarters. Then, he walked in front of me and asked, "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "You heard what Lu Zhenyang said today. During the Spreading Wings assembly tomorrow, he will definitely challenge me. Uncle Yang, you also know that I haven't undergone the Dragon Vein baptism. My realm is 1 rank lower than his. How can I compete?" Yang Shilong frowned. "What do you mean?" "What I mean is, can you and the headquarters intervene? The Spreading Wings assembly has always been an exchange between those in the pressure point realm. He can challenge me if he wants, but he has to wait 1 or 2 days for me to enter the pressure point realm. If he wants to challenge me, I can accompany him anytime. I tried to maintain a smile on my face, but I felt slightly humiliated. If there was another way, I definitely wouldn't have begged for mercy. However, the difference between the two realms was too great. If Lu Zhenyang's talent wasn't even at 1 meridian, I might still have a chance. However, he was currently at 3 meridians. How could I fight him? I had no choice but to come up with this plan. After listening to my words, Yang Shilong was silent for a while before nodding. The Metaphysics Association's rules can't be changed. I have to discuss this with the others. If they don't object, I'll try my best to help you. I was delighted and hastily thanked him. He was the main person in charge of the fledgling Phoenix Assembly. As long as he was willing to help, Lu Zhenyang would have to give him face. Yang Shilong waved his hand and didn't say anything else before quickly leaving. I hurried back to my room. I didn't dare to waste any time and continued to stabilize the Tao energy in my body. The night passed quickly. The last beam of Tao energy in my body had stabilized by 60%. If nothing unexpected happened, it would be completely stabilized tonight or tomorrow morning. In addition, Yang Shilong had promised me yesterday that as long as he could stall Lu Zhenyang for a day, he wouldn't be able to act arrogantly anymore. I felt much more relaxed. After eating breakfast, I even had the mood to ask Zhang Wenfei how he felt after reaching the acupoint pressure realm. Zhang Wenfei told me that after reaching the acupuncture point realm, the light column of Tao energy in the body would disappear. It would turn into liquid Tao energy that looked like running water, flowing through the meridians and acupoints in the body. Moreover, this qi of the way would not increase out of thin air. In fact, it was still formed from the previous qi of the way. It was just that after turning into a liquid state, the qi of the way was much more refined. Thus, it could support the geomancy master to start using hand seals, astral steps, and other methods. The records of geomancy in the death scripture could be said to be all-encompassing. However, most of them were the most basic records. The records after the Geomaster realm were somewhat general and did not clearly state the details. Zhang Wenfei's words provided me with a lot of information. It turned out that after reaching the acupuncture point realm, the amount of Tao energy wouldn't increase. It seemed that my 5 light columns of Tao energy had the upper hand in terms of quantity. Moreover, if the strange, dark green energy was also considered a type of Tao energy, I guessed that it wouldn't be any weaker than the Geomancy Master's acupuncture point realm. In that case, the only difference between me and the acupuncture point realm was the hand seals and astral step. However, after thinking about it, the young Phoenix Gathering participants had just reached the acupuncture point realm. Although the hand seals and astral steps were miraculous, how many of these powers could they use? I guessed that besides Han Wennan, the others had just entered the acupuncture point realm. As for Han Wennan, he had used a power similar to the hand seals during the ranking competition. At that time, he had used one finger to poke and scatter my yin and yang fish. He must have a deep understanding of the hand seals. As I was lost in my thoughts, breakfast time ended quickly. The other members of the Guangdong branch quickly gathered together. We then rushed to the venue for today's Young Phoenix Spreading Wings conference. After we sat down in Area B, Zhang Wenfei worriedly asked me what we were going to do today. I smiled and told him about my meeting with Yang Shilong yesterday. I told him not to worry and to adjust his body so that we could get a good ranking for the Guangdong branch in today's Wings conference. Zhang Wenfei had amazed everyone yesterday. The number of meridians he had opened was enough to make him into the top 3. He was tied with Han Wennan in 3rd place. During today's Wings conference, I didn't dare to think about challenging the top 3 members of the previous Wings conference. However, I had to be careful not to be challenged by the people who ranked behind him yesterday. Zhang Wenfei sighed in relief and nodded with a smile. Don't worry. Stabilize your Tao energy. I definitely won't be as impulsive as I was during the ranking competition. This time, I'm sure I'll be the pillar of the Guangdong branch. He didn't use a sonorous tone, but said it calmly. It seemed that he had matured a lot after the previous defeat. With Yang Shilong's promise and Zhang Wenfei's 2 meridians quasi-present, there was nothing to worry about today. I closed my eyes and continued to immerse myself in stabilizing my Tao energy. The people from the other branches quickly arrived at the venue. After everyone had arrived, the 2 vice presidents, Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, brought the top 10 members of the previous Wings Conference to the venue. Today was said to be an exchange of pointers with the previous school, but they naturally couldn't bring all the members of the previous Wings Conference. They only brought the top 10 members to replace them. When they appeared, they immediately caused the entire venue to cheer. Everyone stared at the beautiful figure next to Yang Shilong and Dan Feng. She had the talent of a 3-meridian Earth Master, advanced to glory of knowledge in 3 years, and became the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. With these dazzling halos and her exceptional appearance, Yi Pianpian was an absolute goddess in the hearts of all the feng shui masters. The cheers of the entire venue were only for her. Even though I was immersed in cultivation, I still heard the deafening cheers. However, I didn't open my eyes. I also admired Yi Pianpian, but it was only purely because of her cultivation realm. It couldn't rise to the level of treating her as a goddess. After Yang Shilong brought the top 10 members of the previous Wings Conference to the rostrum, he officially announced the opening of the Fledgling Phoenix Conference. The opening ceremony of the Fledgling Phoenix Conference always had a reserved program, which was the battle between the new and the previous fledgling phoenixes. Although the fledgling phoenixes of the current world had never won, this battle had nothing to do with winning or losing. It was just a kind of honor. After 3 years of development, the previous generation's fledgling had already become a famous figure in the metaphysics world. As for the new generation's fledgling, as long as they stood together with the previous generation's fledgling, it would be an unparalleled honor. Not to mention that the previous fledgling phoenix was Yi Pianpian, the absolute beauty who had created the history of the Fledgling Phoenix Conference. When Lu Zhenyang walked to the rostrum with a smile that couldn't be concealed, Han Wenan's stiff face had already turned ashen. From the qualifier to the Fledgling Phoenix Conference, and even the past 3 years of bitter cultivation, Han Wenan had put in all his effort just to stand together with Yi Pianpian today. Who would have thought that the one to stand in the end would be Lu Zhenyang, who he had always looked down upon? How could it go to this extent to make fools of people? However, no matter how much he hated Lu Zhenyang, there was nothing he could do. Who told the frivolous Lu Zhenyang to open his quasi-3 meridians? Even if Han Wenan still had the confidence to beat Lu Zhenyang into a pile of dog shit, it was useless. In the end, the Fledgling Phoenix Conference still valued talent the most. I didn't know about the hatred in Han Wenan's heart, but when I heard the surrounding cheers and imagined the loathsome expression on Lu Zhenyang's face, I felt inexplicably unhappy. Perhaps it was because of the hatred towards Lu Zhenyang, or perhaps there was something else. I didn't know the reason, but I felt very uncomfortable. Unfortunately, I was the same as Han Wenan and couldn't stop him. I could only watch as Lu Zhenyang moved towards Yi Pianpian like a dog, wagging his tail. He had a flattering smile on his face as he shouted at Yi Pianpian from afar, "Senior Sister Yi, we're both fledgling phoenixes. Today, please go easy on me and don't let me lose too badly." I couldn't see anything from Yi Pianpian's expression. It was as cold as before, and she didn't seem to care about anyone. She only slightly nodded at Lu Zhenyang. The two of them stood on the rostrum and began the battle between the new and old fledgling phoenixes. As a senior, Yi Pianpian naturally wouldn't make the first move. She only stood there in white with a cold expression and a calm expression. Lu Zhenyang looked at Yi Pianpian with an intoxicated expression. After a long while, He took out an artifact and threw it into the air after receiving Tao energy. As expected of the capital's Lu family, he casually took out another artifact. I took a closer look and saw that he had taken out a huge seal. However, it was different from the yellow-white Mount Tai seal. This seal was completely black. After it was thrown into the air, it didn't smash towards Yipampian. Instead, it formed a huge black shadow that enveloped Lu Zhenyang's body. This should be a defensive artifact. Lu Zhenyang wasn't muddle-headed at this moment. He had to think about losing before thinking about winning. After taking out the defensive artifact, Lu Zhenyang's hands moved slightly and he began to form hand seals. This wasn't strange at all. After reaching the acupoint realm, one would naturally have to rely on hand seals to attack. However, Lu Zhenyang's next move was a bit strange. Halfway through his hand seal, he suddenly lifted his leg and rushed towards Yipampian. Hand seals were usually like artifacts. They could be used from a distance and only a few needed to be used at close range. If Lu Zhenyang had used a hand seal that was close to his body, it would be understandable. However, the hand seal he used was the most common Lingxi finger seal. After forming it, he could condense the Tao energy in his body and use it to attack from a distance. He didn't need to use it at close range. I cursed him in my heart. This guy obviously wanted to rely on his defensive artifact to rush to Yipampian's side. As for his purpose of rushing to Yipampian's side, it was obvious that he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to have some physical contact with her. Despicable, vulgar, and shameless, Lu Zhenyang was the best. I was only angry in my heart, but Han Wen'an's eyes were already spitting fire. He stood up from his seat and clenched his fist. Looking at his posture, if he was pulled by the people around him, he would directly rush to the podium. Fortunately, Lu Zhenyang had underestimated Yipampian's strength in the end. After rushing over with a vulgar expression, Yipampian only took a small step forward. The black shadow surrounding Lu Zhenyang's body instantly deflated, as if it had been heavily injured. His entire body was sent flying far away. He stood on the ground with a sluggish expression, as if he didn't understand what had happened. Seeing this scene, the crowd below the stage immediately cheered. As expected of Yipampian, who was a quasi-3-meridian earthly master in the glory of knowledge realm. That small step just now was most likely the astral footwork. She easily made all of Lu Zhenyang's little plans useless. He did not even have the chance to use the rhino spirit finger he had condensed in his hand. However, Yipampian wasn't as cold as she appeared to be. Even though she had forced Lu Zhenyang back with one move, she had controlled the power of the astral steps very well. It only scattered the power of the defensive artifact and didn't injure Lu Zhenyang. Even though Lu Zhenyang's heart was clouded by lust, he still had some rationality left. He chuckled and admitted defeat. Yipampian coldly nodded her head, then returned to her seat on the platform and calmly sat down. The fight between the young and old phoenixes had ended. However, Lu Zhenyang didn't walk down from the platform. Instead, he suddenly turned his head and said to Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, "During the previous ranking competition, Director Song Xing said that any exchange of pointers can have a life and death duel. Is that true?" My heart shuddered. Didn't Yang Shilong promise me that? Why did Lu Zhenyang mention a life and death duel now? Before I could react, Yang Shilong and Dan Feng looked at each other and nodded to Lu Zhenyang. It's true. The corners of Lu Zhenyang's mouth rose into a sinister smile. Then, he suddenly turned his head and stared at me. Lu Zhenyang of the Beijing branch requests a life and death duel with Zhou Yi of the Guangdong branch. Everyone's gaze turned to the Guangdong branch. I was silent for a while before I stood up. I didn't look at Lu Zhenyang, but at Yang Shilong. I asked in a low voice, "President Yang, what's going on?" Yang Shilong sat there in silence. Vice President Dan Feng stood up and coldly said to me, Yesterday, you asked the Metaphysics Association to stop Lu Zhenyang from challenging you. After our discussion, all the people in the Young Phoenix gathering have been able to reach the pressure point realm. You're just a special case. We can't break the rules because of a special case. After our discussion, the Metaphysics Association has decided to reject your request. In an instant, the crowd was in an uproar. People from the other branches were constantly discussing. This Zhou Yi of the Guangdong branch is so timid. He actually looked for the people from the Metaphysics Association to avoid the battle. What a joke. Yeah, wasn't he quite powerful during the ranking competition? He even dared to challenge Han Wennan. How come he's so cowardly now? I stood there as my heart fell into an ice cave. It wasn't because of the surrounding discussions, but because of Yang Shilong's silence. I thought that his words yesterday were a promise to me. Now, it seemed that it was just a perfunctory statement. Thinking about it, if it was before yesterday, the Metaphysics Association might have tried to help me because of my talent. However, after yesterday, the Metaphysics Association definitely knew about the Qilin goo in my body. Moreover, Lu Zhenyang had activated his 3 meridians. Under such circumstances, who would care about me? For the sake of Lu Zhenyang, the Metaphysics Association was willing to sacrifice Zhou Yi, whose talent had yet to be determined and who was likely to die in the future. While I was silent, Zhang Wenfei desperately shouted at me, "Zhou Yi, bear with it for now. You mustn't agree. As long as you don't fight to the death, he won't dare to kill you. You mustn't agree." I raised my head blankly. The last time I challenged him, he agreed. Chapter 139. Zhou Yi of the Guangdong branch accepts the challenge. As I spoke, my gaze was no longer confused, but determined. I was already deeply humiliated when I went to look for Yang Shilong last night. I didn't think that I would still be unable to avoid this battle. Since that was the case, why should I humiliate myself and avoid the battle? Even if Zhang Wenfei rejected the life and death duel, Lu Zhenyang could still use the rules of the Young Phoenix spreading wings gathering to continue challenging me. Although it wouldn't be a life and death duel, if Lu Zhenyang really killed me, what would the Metaphysics Association do? Would they punish Lu Zhenyang severely because of me? Obviously not. Moreover, I had already learned from Zhang Wenfei yesterday that after entering the acupuncture point realm, the amount of Dao energy couldn't be increased in a short period of time. In other words, I had 5 times more Dao energy than Lu Zhenyang. Since that was the case, why couldn't I fight? Anyway, I had the Qilin parasite in my body and my future was unknown. A life and death duel was a life and death duel. I looked coldly at Lu Zhenyang and was about to walk to the rostrum. At this moment, Zhang Wenfei pulled me back. I thought he was going to stop me, but he handed me his yin-yang yama brush and said, "Take care." I hesitated for a moment before taking the yin-yang yama brush. Before entering the acupuncture point realm, I couldn't use hand seals or step. If I wanted to use my Dao energy, the best choice was still a magic tool. After walking to the rostrum, Lu Zhenyang looked at me with a smile. He didn't even have the anger that he had towards me before. It seemed that he had completely defeated me. I glanced at him and didn't say anything. I just signed my name on the document that Dan Feng handed over. After Dan Feng walked down with the document, Lu Zhenyang finally spoke. He said to me disdainfully, "Kid, I'll give you a chance to make the first move. Otherwise, once I make my move, you won't have a chance to make a move." I didn't take his sarcasm to heart. I held the Yama brush in my hand and slowly mobilized the Dao energy in my body. I even mobilized the 5th Dao energy pillar that hadn't completely stabilized yet. The Dao energy that hadn't stabilized couldn't be used easily. It was easy to lose control and harm oneself. However, at this moment of life and death, I couldn't care about that. Every bit of power was incomparably important to me. The qi of the Wei in his body was finally fully mobilized, and the yin and yang qi on the Yama brush was stimulated by the rich qi of the Wei. It was like a jet, instantly forming a huge yin and yang fish pattern in the air. This was the first time I had used the yin-yang Yama brush since I had 5 light pillars of Tao Qi in my body. The yin-yang fish pattern grew as the Tao Qi in my body increased. At this time, I had only used 3 light pillars of Tao Qi in my body, but the yin-yang fish pattern had already reached an exaggerated level. It lay between me and Lu Zhenyang, with 1 black and 1 white yin and yang qi constantly circulating on it. It looked mysterious and terrifying. My expression changed slightly. The yin and yang fish pattern had become so huge. If someone were to analyze it carefully, they would definitely be able to see that the Tao energy in my body far surpassed that of ordinary people. The 5 pillars of Tao Qi are my greatest secret, and I can't expose it no matter what. Moreover, the last pillar of Tao Qi isn't stable, and there are too many variables when I use it. To be safe, I should only use the power of the 3 pillars of Tao Qi to test Lu Zhenyang's acupoint sealing cultivation. With that thought, I temporarily stopped pouring the Tao energy into the Yama brush and directed the yin-yang fish pattern towards Lu Zhenyang. Lu Zhenyang looked at the huge yin-yang fish in front of him, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He became cautious and immediately threw out the defensive artifact that he had used before. The black seal formed a huge circle of faint black shadows around him. Because of its huge size, the yin-yang fish seemed to be slowly moving towards Lu Zhenyang, but in fact its speed wasn't slow at all. When Lu Zhenyang took out his defensive magic tool, the yin-yang fish fiercely slammed into it. The yin and yang energies constantly circulated, making them look like 2 flood dragons that fiercely gnawed at the shadow. Almost in a flash, half of Lu Zhenyang's defensive light curtain was bitten off by the yin-yang fish. I didn't relax, and I became even more solemn. Before Lu Zhenyang had reached the acupoint sealing realm, his Tao energy couldn't last more than 1 second under my light pillar of Tao Qi. But now, his Tao energy hadn't increased by much, and I had used up 3 of my light pillars of Tao Qi, but I could only break a small part of his defensive magic tool. It should be known that he hadn't even used his hand seals yet. The acupoint sealing realm seemed to be much stronger than I had imagined. Just as I was thinking about this, Lu Zhenyang's hands finally moved. He didn't face me directly, but placed his hands on the faint black light screen that was drawn out by the defensive magic tool. After a series of mysterious hand seals that I had never seen before, the originally still black light screen suddenly started to circulate. As the black light moved, the part of the light curtain that had been bitten off by the yin-yang fish started to slowly grow. Although the yin and yang energies of the yin-yang fish were still gnawing at it, it only took half a minute for the black light curtain to recover to its original state. Then, no matter how much the yin-yang fish tried to gnaw at it, the light curtain would instantly recover, rendering the yin-yang fish useless. What kind of hand seal was that? How could it be so magical? My expression changed greatly. The yin-yang fish couldn't even break the light curtain, so how could I fight against Lu Zhenyang? Just as I was thinking about this, Lu Zhenyang's hands suddenly left the light curtain and moved in front of him, forming a different hand seal. I had seen this hand seal not long ago. It was the Rhino Spirit Finger seal that he had used against Yi Piampian. Against Yi Piampian, he couldn't even complete the hand seal, but when it formed in front of me, I felt a great pressure. The hand seal technique would lock on to a target at the beginning. If I could break it before he finished his hand seal, I wouldn't be affected. However, if I waited for the hand seal to form completely, the target that was locked on to wouldn't be able to dodge it no matter what. They could only be hit or use their cultivation to resist it. At this moment, I naturally couldn't wait for him to form the hand seal. I hurriedly activated the 2 remaining light pillars of Tao energy in my body, as well as the dark green energy mixed with the Tao energy. I wanted to break through his protective artifact and break his hand seal as soon as possible. But what I didn't expect was that when he faced Yi Pianpian just now, the hand seal that he hadn't been able to complete for a long time was completed in an instant. Then, he put his two thumbs together, and an extremely dense light spot of Taoist Qi suddenly appeared on them. In the blink of an eye, it shot towards me. Because it was so fast, the light spot even formed a light pillar in the air. It looked as though an invisible giant was standing there and pointing at me with a glowing finger. After the Rhino Spirit Finger seal was completed, it would produce a Rhino Spirit Finger. And this slender light pillar was the Rhino Spirit Finger. In a hurry, I didn't have the time to activate the two remaining light pillars of Tao energy in my body. I could only instinctively use the Yama brush to block the huge yin-yang fish in front of me. However, in the next second, when the light finger approached the yin-yang fish, a hole instantly appeared on the huge yin-yang fish pattern. The speed was so fast that it looked as though the yin-yang fish had created a hole first, and then the light finger passed through it. After passing through the yin-yang fish, the light finger didn't slow down at all and continued to shoot towards me. At this moment, I didn't have the time to react. I could only watch as the light finger approached my body and finally rushed towards my forehead. The forehead was where the Life Palace was located. Lu Zhenyang had used a killing move from the start. I suddenly felt extremely regretful. Lu Zhenyang was at the pressure point realm. I knew from the start that I wouldn't be able to defeat him. Why didn't I use all my Tao energy and the dark green energy? Why was I so naive to test him? Now, the result of the test was out. This hand seal technique wasn't something that I could block with just 3 light pillars of Tao energy. It was a pity that I had to use my life to exchange for this lesson. The light finger was only 1 foot away from my forehead. Just as I was in despair, a small wasteland suddenly appeared in front of me. In the middle of the wasteland, there was a small mound that looked like a lonely grave. Next to the grave, there were some twisted weeds. I should be standing on the platform of the Metaphysics Union, but where did this mound of weeds come from? I was bewildered for a moment. I suddenly remembered the protective magic tool that Director Song Xing had given me, the Square Sky Fan. At that time, I didn't know the effect of the Square Sky Fan, so I kept it close to me and prepared to slowly nourish it. Normally, a magic tool would need to be nourished for several months or even years before it could connect with the user's mind. However, in just a few days, the Square Sky Fan had appeared when I was in danger. No wonder Director Song Xing had said that the Square Sky Fan was magical. It turned out that it had the supernatural power to protect its owner. However, what was the use of this small, lonely grave and weeds? I didn't understand, but the Square Sky Fan quickly told me the answer. After the Square Sky Fan appeared, the light finger's trajectory toward me suddenly changed. Although the angle wasn't big, the distance of 1 foot was enough to completely change its trajectory. In the end, the terrifying light finger didn't hit my forehead. Instead, it heavily hit my left shoulder. When a Geomaster uses Taoist Qi, a layer of Taoist Qi will instinctively appear around their body. However, the yin-yang fish was unable to block the finger of light. Naturally, it would not be blocked by my Taoist Qi. It directly broke through the Taoist Qi and struck my body. In an instant, my left shoulder felt like it had been hit by a sniper rifle. I flew several meters backward and fell heavily on the ground. Even my internal organs were affected, causing me to spit out a mouthful of blood. My body had suffered a heavy blow, and I had completely lost control of the Yama brush. The huge yin-yang fish pattern in the air instantly dissipated, turning into a surging Qi of the Wei. It returned to my body and nourished my severely wounded body. I originally thought that I had the power to fight, but who knew that I would be defeated as fast as lightning right after we started fighting? The smile on Lu Zhenyang's face reappeared. With a malicious smile, he walked towards me step by step. "Zhou Yi, the vastness of your Tao energy really surprises me. I have to admit that if you had reached the pressure point realm, I might not be your opponent. But who told you not to? You stole my Mount Tai seal, and caused me to get injured before I could observe the true dragon vein. You did this, so you have to be prepared to pay with your life. Are you ready to die? Lu Zhenyang smiled as he raised his hand. Between his hands, another lynxy finger was about to form. I supported myself with my hands on the ground and ignored the pain in my body. I wanted to get up, but because my internal organs were injured, I couldn't move for a while. The Tao energy in my body was madly repairing my body, but it needed time. I felt wronged, angry, guilty, and regretful. Now, I had a direct understanding of Lu Zhenyang's ability. As long as I used all 5 Tao energy pillars, along with the magic of the dark green energy, I would definitely have the power to fight him. Even if I couldn't win, even if I had to die, I could drag him down with me. But now, the injuries on my body made me unable to stand up, and I couldn't use the Tao energy in my body at all. Just 2 minutes, I could suppress the injuries on my body and use all my energy to fight him. But Lu Zhenyang didn't give me time. What should I do? Seeing that Lu Zhenyang's hand seal was about to be completed, my grievance and anger gradually disappeared. All that was left was self-blame, regret, and a hint of despair. But at that moment Yi Pianpian, who wasn't far from us, suddenly stood up from her seat. Stop. Zhou Yi and I still have an unresolved matter. You disperse the seal. As soon as she finished speaking, she didn't even give Lu Zhenyang time to react. She waved her finger through the air. She didn't seem to use any qi of the way, but she directly shattered the handprint that Lu Zhenyang had formed between his hands. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone stared at Yi Pianpian, not knowing why she had suddenly intervened in this matter. Some people even began to suspect that Yi Pianpian and I had a special relationship. Lu Zhenyang's face was also full of shock and anger. His eyes were almost spitting fire. He glared at Yi Pianpian and said, "What right do you have to intervene in a duel of life and death?" At that moment, he completely ignored his admiration for Yi Pianpian and turned to stare at Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, the 2 vice presidents. He continued angrily, "Don't you care about the rules of the Metaphysics Association? Although she's the vice president, she can't be so unreasonable, right?" Yang Shilong and Dan Feng sat there awkwardly. They opened their mouths but couldn't say anything. Lu Zhenyang was a quasi-3 meridian cultivator, but Yi Pianpian was a 3 meridian cultivator. They couldn't offend either of them. Their silence allowed Lu Zhenyang to quickly understand the situation. The anger on his face became even more ferocious. However, looking at Yi Pianpian in the distance, he had no other choice. After standing there silently for half a minute, Lu Zhenyang finally turned around and vented his anger on me. He lowered his head and spat on me. He cursed, "A pretty boy who only knows how to hide behind a woman's back. In a duel of life and death, you still have to rely on a woman to save your life. How shameless! Even if I kill a man who lives off a woman, I wouldn't want to dirty my hands. I'll spare your life today." It was obvious that he, like the others, had started to suspect my relationship with Yi Pianpian. However, only I knew that Yi Pianpian only wanted to get information about the Fire God Temple from me. How could she have saved me on purpose? However, at that moment I couldn't care less about what others were thinking. I couldn't care less about Lu Zhenyang's spit on me, and I couldn't care less about whether I was a pretty boy or not. I was only calculating the time. Half a minute, just half a minute. I would be able to suppress the injuries on my body. Lu Zhenyang was already walking down the stage. I stared at him with only one thought in my mind. Lu Zhenyang, slow down. There's still 20 seconds. 10 seconds. Chapter 140. Finally, the moment Lu Zhenyang was about to step down from the stage, I suddenly stood up. Cough, cough. Lu Jinyang, this life and death duel, isn't over yet. I could barely suppress the injuries on my body. As I spoke, I coughed violently. But this didn't affect anything. As long as I could move my body, the energy in my body could be completely mobilized. Lu Jinyang suddenly turned his head and looked at me suspiciously. Then, he turned to look at Yi Pianpian. I understood what he meant. Without waiting for him to speak, I said, "This is a life and death duel. No one can interfere, not even the people from the Metaphysics Association." Then, I turned to look at Yi Pianpian and said loudly to her, "Find a person who can verify the Tao and divine the heaven's secrets at the place where it disappeared. Find a feng shui master to stand on that stone platform and offer his flesh and blood as a sacrifice. Then, the clouds will be dispelled." This was the method to find the fire god temple. Yi Pianpian just wanted this. After telling her, she had no reason to protect me. As expected, hearing my words, Yi Pianpian frowned and thought for a while. Then, she looked up at me and finally sat down silently. But after sitting down, she suddenly asked, "Zhou Yi, why do you want to die?" "Want to die?" I smirked with blood. I wasn't trying to die, but I saw an opportunity to win. I didn't answer her and just turned to look at Lu Jinyang. After Yi Pianpian sat down, the hatred on his face disappeared, and he looked at me with surprise. This time, he didn't say anything and just formed a seal with his hands and walked towards me. This time, I didn't dare to be careless. In an instant, I condensed all the energy in my body and crazily surged towards the yin-yang Yama brush. Although I had just used the power of 3 Tao Qi light pillars, after the yin and yang fishes were destroyed, the Tao Qi returned to my body. Therefore, the power of the 5 Tao Qi light pillars was still very sufficient, and I had completely mobilized them. At the same time, I condensed the small amount of dark green energy and sent it into the Yama brush. As the yin and yang qi revolved crazily, an even larger yin-yang fish appeared out of thin air. This time, the yin-yang fish had a faint green tint to it, and the pressure it exuded was several times stronger than before. At the same time the yin-yang fish formed, Lu Jinyang's rhino finger, condensed again and shot towards me. I didn't care about it at all and only guided the yin-yang fish pattern towards Lu Jinyang. The speed of the telepathic finger was very fast, but the speed of the yin-yang fish was definitely not slow either. What was even more surprising was that when the yin-yang fish reached Lu Jinyang, it suddenly changed. The huge pattern suddenly dispersed, and the black and white yin-yang qi in the middle suddenly stopped circling each other. Instead, they turned into 2 flood dragons, one black and one white. Their speed increased explosively, and they surrounded Lu Jinyang from both sides. Even I didn't know why this sudden change had happened, and could only watch helplessly. Lu Jinyang's expression changed, and he quickly took out his defensive magic tool. When the faint black light screen appeared, he didn't hesitate to condense another finger seal. However, there was another change at this time. After Lu Jinyang was surrounded, the 2 flood dragons formed by the yin-yang qi actually coiled around Lu Jinyang with their heads and tails attached. In almost an instant, the yin and yang symbol formed once again. However, this time it was different from before. The yin and yang energies rotated rapidly, forming a primal chaos. And within this primal chaos, there was Lu Jinyang. The black and white yin and yang qi seemed to contain some chaotic force. In the blink of an eye, it tore apart the faint black light around Lu Jinyang. Afterwards, Lu Jinyang's body also began to spin madly. At this moment, Lu Jinyang's rhino finger arrived in front of me. Previously, the square sky fan had automatically protected its master and saved my life. This time, as long as I activated my Tao energy, the square sky fan would definitely be able to save me. However, at this time, I had poured all my Tao energy into the Yama brush, and didn't have any extra Tao energy to activate the square sky fan. I could only wait for it to appear again. As for whether or not it would appear again, I didn't care about it anymore. I didn't even pay attention to the approaching rhino finger. My eyes were fixed on Lu Zhenyang in the distance. At this time, the two crazily revolving flood dragon energies had completely turned into a whirlwind. I could only hear the sound of the whirlwind, and even Lu Zhenyang's body couldn't be seen. The corners of my mouth curled into a cold smile. So what if he's at the pressure point realm? So what if he's at the quasi-3 meridians realm? 5 light pillars of Tao energy in addition to the dark green energy. If I used my full strength, it would be just as I thought. I could completely fight against Lu Zhenyang. At this moment, I suddenly felt a heavy blow on my right shoulder. After I fell to the ground, I realized that the scene of a lonely grave with weeds had appeared in front of me again. It should be the Square Sky Fan taking the initiative to save its master again, diverting Lu Zhenyang's rhino finger. As I fell to the ground with heavy injuries, the two yin-yang flood dragon energies drawn out by the Yama brush instantly dissipated with a loud bang. The remaining Tao energy mixed with the dark green energy returned to my body, wrapping around my body to heal my injuries. It was almost the same outcome as the previous time, but this time, Lu Zhenyang couldn't walk towards me with ease. After the yin-yang flood dragon energies dissipated more than half, Lu Zhenyang's body directly fell from the sky and heavily fell to the ground. His entire body was paralyzed, and he didn't move at all. After the remaining flood dragon energies completely disappeared, another half of his arm fell from the sky. The entire crowd suddenly cried out in alarm. Only then did they realize that one of Lu Zhenyang's arms had been twisted off by the flood dragon energies. Not only that, but the black seal that he had previously held in his hand had also broken into 2 or 3 pieces, falling not far from his body. Seeing this scene, Dan Feng and Yang Shilong, who were on the platform, immediately rushed over to check on Lu Zhenyang's injuries. After all, he was the pride of the Lu family, a young phoenix. Among the people on the platform, apart from Yi Pianpian who glanced at me, no one else paid attention to me. The feng shui masters below the platform didn't stop exclaiming. At the start, they were exclaiming at Lu Zhenyang's tragic state, but after they reacted, they were exclaiming that Lu Zhenyang, a second realm earth master feng shui master, was actually defeated by me, a dragon-seeking realm person. Moreover, Lu Zhenyang was a young phoenix. This simply overturned everyone's thoughts. How could such a thing happen when there was a huge gap between the two realms? In the decades of history of the Metaphysics Association, such a thing had never happened before. At that moment, someone finally shifted their gaze onto me. Moreover, there were over 100 gazes that focused on me. Those gazes seemed to contain endless questions. It was as if everyone was asking, how strong is this person's talent to be able to defeat a young phoenix in the dragon-seeking realm? Could it be another Yi Pianpian? At that moment, I had my eyes closed and didn't know what these people were thinking. I was only trying my best to recover from the injuries on my body with the remaining energy. After being injured by the telepathic finger, I didn't see what happened to Lu Zhenyang, nor did I know whether I won or not. After around 3 to 4 minutes, I finally suppressed my injuries. I suddenly opened my eyes and saw a group of people on the other side of the platform. Lu Zhenyang's figure wasn't in front of me at all. Very quickly, I understood what had happened. I finally let out the gloomy feeling that I had been suppressing for a long time. The winner of this life and death duel was still me. Before I could rejoice, I instantly realized that, after the battle, the 5th energy pillar in my body didn't go out of control. Instead, it had completely stabilized. I almost didn't dare to believe it. After being stunned for a long time, I gathered all the remaining Taoist Qi in my body into the 5th Taoist Qi light pillar and tried to guide the Taoist Qi to other places. Sure enough, everything was as smooth as an arm. Only the completely stabilized energy could be guided like that without any delay. This meant that I could immediately undergo the dragon energy baptism. Of course, before that, I still had to completely replenish the energy in my body. It was very easy to replenish the energy that was used up. I just needed to rest for a day. But now that I had a complete true dragon vein in the jade bracelet, I naturally didn't need to go through that much trouble. Sitting there, I slightly separated the dark green power of the jade bracelet. The surging dragon chi directly surged into my body, and was madly absorbed and transformed by the few Dao Qi light pillars in my body. It only took about 10 minutes for the 5 beams of Dao Qi to recover half of their Dao Qi. At that moment, Yang Shilong and Vice President Dan Feng finally stood up from Lu Zhenyang's side. They coldly looked at me. Then, Dan Feng's face darkened as he announced the final result of my victory. I temporarily stopped absorbing the energy and stood up. I looked at Lu Zhenyang. He had already woken up. His face was expressionless as he stared blankly at his severed arm. Perhaps he noticed my gaze. Lu Zhenyang indifferently looked at me. His eyes were filled with incomparable hatred. He struggled and shouted at me, "You severed my arm and destroyed my Lu family's 7 inherited magic tools. Just you wait, my Lu family definitely won't let you off. You don't have many days left to live." I had already formed enmity with him. I didn't feel his threat at all. The only thing that surprised me was that the 2 magic tools that he took out were actually his Lu family's inherited magic tools. It seemed that I would have to carefully study that Mount Tai seal. I made a mental note of this and smiled at him. "I don't need you to worry about whether I can live or not. I only know that the dignified Lu family's legitimate son was defeated by a feng shui master who is 1 rank lower than you. Today's fledgling phoenix gathering will definitely be remembered by everyone." "You." Lu Zhenyang fiercely spat out a trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. He was actually so angry that he spat out blood. After a long time, he seemed to be consoling himself. He forced a smile and said, "So what if I was defeated by you? I've only just reached the pressure point realm today. Don't forget that I'm this year's fledgling phoenix. I only have a quasi-3 meridians talent. So what if you're strong? Your talent isn't as good as mine. You're just another Han Wennan." After he said that, I suddenly remembered that the energy in my body had already stabilized. I could immediately undergo the dragon aura baptism. I suddenly smiled at him. A strange thought appeared in my mind. If I underwent the dragon aura baptism and opened my meridians, if I had more energy than him, would the title of fledgling phoenix still belong to him? With that thought, I immediately turned to Yang Shilong and Dan Feng and asked, "Vice President Yang, Vice President Dan, the fledgling phoenix gathering hasn't ended yet and I haven't undergone the dragon aura baptism, so the title of fledgling phoenix hasn't been decided yet, right?" Not only Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, but everyone else was stunned and looked at me in confusion. I then explained, "The energy in my body was previously unstable. Now that it's finally stabilized, I can undergo the dragon aura baptism." Now they all understood that I was about to undergo the dragon aura baptism and fight for the title of fledgling phoenix. Everyone looked at me in disbelief. After Yang Shilong and Dan Feng discussed for a while, they said to me with an unsightly expression, "You're right. The fledgling phoenix gathering hasn't ended yet. You can undergo the dragon aura baptism now. As for the title of fledgling phoenix, it's better not to boast about it too early." I nodded and didn't waste any more time talking to him. I sat down cross-legged on the rostrum. My energy hadn't been replenished yet, so after I sat down, I used 10 minutes to replenish all the energy in the light pillars. Then, I opened my eyes and said, "I'm going to start." After I said that, I closed my eyes and circulated the energy in the 5 light pillars, as well as the mysterious dark green energy. I guided them towards my 8 extraordinary meridians. After all the energy had reached my 8 extraordinary meridians, I fainted from an intense pain. The process of the dragon aura baptism could only be controlled by a feng shui master. As for how many acupoints and meridians the energy could open, it was all up to the heavens. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I finally woke up from my unconsciousness. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the hall was brightly lit. No matter if it was the people on the rostrum or the people on the viewing platform, they were all sitting there. It was exactly the same as before I underwent the dragon aura baptism. Not a single person was missing. The duration of the dragon aura baptism determined the number of meridians opened. None of the people here had left. Could it be that it had only been a short while? I didn't have time to think about this question, so I closed my eyes to comprehend. In reality, the feng shui master didn't know how many meridians he had opened, but he had a vague feeling. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Lu Zhenyang smiling at me. From his expression, it was obvious that he wasn't optimistic about the number of meridians I had opened. Chapter 141. After the acupoints and meridians were opened, the original Dao Qi wouldn't decrease, but it would be compressed into a denser liquid Dao Qi that would slowly circulate through the opened acupoints and meridians. At this stage, even if a feng shui master didn't cultivate, the liquid Dao Qi would automatically circulate in the body. It would circulate through the acupoints and meridians in about 2 hours, causing the Dao Qi to grow. Feng shui masters called this process one cycle. No matter how many meridians were opened, the duration of one cycle was fixed. It was just that the more meridians were opened, the more Dao Qi would grow. This was the reason why the number of meridians opened was considered talent. In the same cycle, a 3-meridian earth master like Yi Pianpian would grow 3 times faster than a 1-meridian earth master like Su Shuxing and 6 times faster than a half-meridian earth master. If this continued, Yi Pianpian would naturally leave the other 1-meridian and half-meridian earth masters far behind her. After waking up from my coma, I felt that the Dao Qi in my body had grown greatly. The process of the dragon aura baptism was the Dao Qi charging through the acupoints and meridians. It could be considered the first cycle of the pressure point realm. My Dao Qi had grown so much in one cycle. I would need to open at least 3 or 4 meridians to achieve such an effect, right? That was why I didn't care about Lu Zhenyang's smile. I also didn't care about how long I was unconscious. Everything depended on the result. Before I could speak, Yang Shilong looked deeply at me and said, "Talent beyond 1 meridian cannot be seen with the naked eye. You need to use an acupoint probing stone." After he said that, Dan Feng nodded slightly, as though he didn't know whether to agree or not. Very quickly, a black-robed elder brought over the acupoint probing stone that I had seen before and placed it in front of me. Because I had seen others use acupoint probing stones before, I didn't need the black-robed elder's reminder. I immediately placed my left hand on the stone. As I had expected, the first complete ink line appeared on the aperture exploring stone almost instantaneously. The first ink line appeared so quickly. He probably has at least half a 2-meridian talent. That's right. After all, his dragon aura baptism lasted from noon to night. It took him about 8 to 10 hours. Although he's not as good as Zhang Wenfei and Han Wennan, it's not strange for him to reach the half a 2-meridian realm. It's just that he's still far away from opening 2 meridians. It's basically impossible. Everyone's gazes were fixed on me as they started to discuss among themselves. Through their words, I found out that I had been unconscious for only 8 to 10 hours. It really wasn't much, but I didn't mind. Compared to the time, I trusted my own feelings more. Less than a second after the first ink line appeared, the shadow of the second ink line appeared. Moreover, this second ink line was no different from the first one. It was also a complete ink line that turned from faint to thick and completely emerged. There wasn't just one person who opened their eyes wide. Even Yang Shilong and Dan Feng couldn't help but look at me. In the distance, Lu Zhenyang, who was recuperating on a chair with a look of disdain, withdrew the smile on his face and was replaced with shock. The complete appearance of the second ink line means that he has at least 2 meridians, perhaps even 3. The person who had just said that it was impossible to reach 2 meridians instantly changed his words and said excitedly to the person beside him. My heart, however, was unperturbed, as I knew that this was far from my limit. The 10 nodes on the ink line slightly trembled. After the second ink line appeared, a thin shadow appeared above the first 2 ink lines. Like the previous 2 ink lines, this ink line was also the first to be revealed as a slender black line instead of the small nodes above it. This meant that the third ink line was very likely to be completely formed. Everyone in the venue was excited. Once this ink line was formed, it meant that he had 3 meridians. The historical record of the Young Phoenix gathering was 3 meridians, and it was Yi Piampian from the previous gathering. Could it be that there will be 2 consecutive Young Phoenix gatherings with 3 meridians? It might not necessarily be 3 meridians. Look at how fast this ink line appeared. Perhaps it will be 4 meridians. Heavens, how is this possible? At this moment, apart from Lu Zhenyang, everyone let go of their prejudices. They were excited that they were about to witness the history of the Metaphysics Association. Their eyes shone as they stared at the aperture exploring stone. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Even I was excited. 1 meridian and 2 meridians were fine, but now it was possible for it to be 3 meridians. I thought about Yi Piampian, a 3-meridian Earth Master, who had advanced to glory of knowledge in a short 3 years. Furthermore, she was appointed as the Vice President of the Metaphysics Association. If I could also reach 3 meridians, wouldn't that mean that I would also be able to reach such heights? Also, the 2 Vice Presidents of the Metaphysics Association had thrown me out to avoid offending Lu Zhenyang. Did they regret it now? I raised my head to look at Yang Shilong and Dan Feng. Coincidentally, they were also looking in my direction. When our eyes met, Yang Shilong awkwardly looked away. However, Dan Feng, who had been ignoring me, smiled at me. His smile seemed to be fawning over me. As expected of the Vice President of the Metaphysics Association, he really knew when to yield and when to stand tall. When I lowered my head again, the third ink line was already more than halfway formed. The 10 nodes on it were completely formed. This meant that opening 3 meridians wouldn't be a problem. Lu Zhenyang only had 2 meridians and 5 meridians, while I had 3 meridians. Just as I had thought, the title of Young Phoenix was about to change hands. Lu Zhenyang had already slumped on the chair. He stared at the acupoint exploring stone under my hand. His eyes were about to spit fire. However, I didn't have the time to care about his feelings. Compared to the grudge between us, my talent was naturally more important. My heart was beating rapidly as I waited for the next movement of the acupoint exploring stone. 3 ink lines had already appeared. Would there be another one? This was the question in my heart. It was also the question in the hearts of all the feng shui masters present. From the history of feng shui masters, a 3-meridian Earth Master was almost the peak that a feng shui master could reach. According to the records, Eternal Spring Jinren Qiuchuji, the famous feng shui master of the Ming dynasty, Lu Bowen, and the others had already opened 3 meridians at this stage. Looking further up, only those who had opened 4 meridians were true masters, such as Zhang Daoling and 3 Reeds Supreme. After the last recorded 4 meridians Earth Master, Chun Tuan, there were no more records of 4 meridians Earth Masters in the world of metaphysics. The highest record was only 3 meridians, like Yi Piampian. This seemed to have become a boundary. In the past few hundred years, there were definitely many geniuses in the world of metaphysics. However, they were only 3 meridians at most. Not even 3 meridians and 1 acupoint had appeared. Today, would we witness the appearance of a genius that surpassed 3 meridians? Everyone was excitedly thinking about this possibility. Finally, after the third ink line had completely stabilized, under everyone's gaze, a small dot suddenly appeared in the blank space above the 3 ink lines. "There's movement! There's movement!" This time, the one who shouted was Vice President Dan Fong. It was hard to imagine that he, who had a gloomy expression before, would lose his composure like this. Although the black dot appeared on the stone wall, it seemed to carry a black aura around it. It drifted in spirals in all directions, forming an extremely faint ink line. As the ink line extended, the second small node also slowly appeared, repeating the scene from before. This fourth ink line was completely different from the previous 3. It did not appear in one go, but instead, a small node brought out a line, and this line brought out the next small node. The ink line did not appear directly. "I'm afraid it's a 4 meridians," someone could not help but say in disappointment. However, someone immediately retorted, "There has never been a record of 3.5 meridians in history. All the 3 meridians Earth Masters have never had an extra acupoint. As for those Earth Masters who surpassed 3 meridians, they all had 4 meridians." This person was right. There were indeed no 3.5 meridians in history, nor were there any quasi-4 meridians. After reaching 3 meridians, the connection between the meridians and acupoints became very strange. It seemed to be different from before. However, in the thousands of years of civilization, the number of Earth Masters with 3 meridians and above was very few. No one had the opportunity to research this problem. Some people were discussing, but even more people were staring at me. In the end, 5 small nodes appeared on the 4th ink line. Along with them, 5 short ink lines also appeared. After reaching this step, the last extended ink line stopped moving, and the 6th node was not produced. Is it over? 3 and 5 meridians? Quasi-4 meridians? I shook my head. It was clearly not 3 and 5 meridians. If there were no complete meridians, the ink line would not appear. However, the 4th ink line on the aperture exploring stone was thick and full. It was exactly the same as the previous 3 ink lines. However, the problem was, why were there only 5 small nodes? Everyone looked at each other and waited for a few more minutes. After there was still no movement on the aperture exploring stone, Vice President Dan Fong was the first to announce excitedly, "Zhou Yi of the Guangdong branch is tested to have an apex 4 meridians." There was an uproar in the venue. All the feng shui masters discussed excitedly. After a few minutes, someone asked, "President Dan, the ink line only showed 3 and 5 meridians. Why did you announce that Zhou Yi has 4 meridians?" Dan Feng chuckled and stroked the non-existent beard on his chin. He said with a smile, "You may not know this, but according to the records of the Absolute Metaphysics Society, above 3 meridians, even if only one acupoint is opened, it will be a complete meridian. It can be called a 4 meridian. This can be seen from the strange phenomenon on the aperture exploring stone. When the first acupoint was opened, the ink line had already formed. As long as the ink line is formed on the aperture exploring stone, it will be a complete meridian. Therefore, there are no records of 3.5 meridians in history. Beyond 3 meridians, it will be 4 meridians." After listening to his explanation, everyone, including me, suddenly understood. However, someone immediately asked, "Then, why did President Dan say that Zhou Yi's talent is at the peak of 4 meridians?" Dan Feng's face didn't look gloomy at all. He still smiled and answered questions. Although there are 8 meridians in the metaphysics world, 4 meridians is the extreme. Reaching 4 meridians is the peak of talent. In the past, Zhang Daoling, the Taoist Grandmaster who founded Dragon Tiger Mountain, had a talent of 4 meridians. Therefore, 4 meridians is the peak. Peak. Just from these 2 words, one could see what 4 meridians meant in the metaphysics world. Everyone looked at me enviously. Although I was excited, there was always a trace of doubt. I wasn't very clear about the things that President Dan Feng had explained before, but even after knowing it now, I still felt that what he said seemed wrong. If 4 meridians was the peak, then why did I feel that there were more than 4 meridians opened in my body? Previously, after guiding the Tao Qi into the 8 meridians, although I immediately fainted, before I fainted, I still felt that the Tao Qi in the 8 meridians and the strange dark green energy had separated from each other. The two were attacking different acupoints. When I used the aperture exploring stone to test, I placed my hand on it. The Tao Qi in my body immediately fluctuated, but the dark green energy didn't move. Chapter 142. Although I thought so, I didn't say it out loud. After all, the dark green energy was very strange and seemed to have a natural restraining effect on Tao Qi. Before I figured it out, I definitely couldn't say it out loud. At this moment, Dan Feng seemed to see Lu Zhenyang and frowned slightly. Then, he smiled and said, "This year's Young Phoenix gathering has been full of twists and turns. It's finally over. According to the rules, the winner of this year's Young Phoenix gathering is the Guangdong branch, Zhou Yi." I couldn't help but raise the corner of my mouth into a strange smile. Not long ago, after Lu Zhenyang had been defeated by me, he had used the Young Phoenix gathering title to cover up his embarrassment, but now I didn't know what Lu Zhenyang was feeling right now. I turned to look at Lu Zhenyang. His face turned green and white as he slumped on the chair. After sitting there in a daze for a long time, he suddenly sat up straight and said loudly, "Zhou Yi's Dragon Qi baptism only lasted for 8 hours. It's impossible for him to have 4 meridians. Absolutely impossible. There must be something wrong with the acupoint probing stone." President Yang, President Dan, quickly changed to another one and tested again. There must be a mistake. His eyes lit up and he unconsciously pressed his broken arm against the armrest of the chair. He shouted excitedly, as if he was grasping at the last straw. Dan Feng and Yang Shilong looked at each other and sighed. Then, Dan Feng said, "Lu Zhenyang, you're injured. It's better for you to go back and rest. As for the acupoint probing stone, there has never been a problem. Although the Dragon Qi baptism is related to opening the meridians, it's not absolute." "Impossible." Lu Zhenyang suddenly dragged his seriously injured body and sat up from the chair. His face was ferocious as he said fiercely, "There must be a mistake. I used a total of 14 to 16 hours for the Dragon Qi baptism. The previous Yi Piampian used more than 20 hours. Why did Zhou Yi only use 8 to 10 hours to surpass us? You're covering for him. If you don't change to another acupoint probing stone, I'll definitely report you to President Gu. I'll also tell my grandfather and ask him to uphold justice for me." At this moment, Lu Zhenyang no longer had his elegant demeanor from before. He had completely turned into a mad dog that went around biting people. Under his constant struggle, the bandage around his severed arm was completely torn off. The wound that had just stopped bleeding once again gushed out a large amount of blood. Yang Shilong and Dan Feng were hesitant. Although they were the vice presidents of the Metaphysics Union, they were still afraid of facing a crazy Lu family's son. At the same time, the other members of the Beijing branch also shouted at the rostrum, saying that the Metaphysics Society was covering up for them. The Dragon Aura baptism had only been going on for 8 to 10 hours, so it was impossible for him to open up 4 meridians. Under their instigation, Yang Shilong and Dan Feng's expressions became uglier and uglier. I frowned and thought for a while, then took the initiative to say to Yang Shilong and the others, "Chairman Yang, Chairman Dan, since they have doubts, let's test it again." I obviously didn't want to help them out, but when I thought about the dark green power that could open up meridians, I couldn't help but want to know how many meridians the dark green power could open up. The probing stone was a very precious thing. It was also an excellent material for making magic tools. Only the rich and powerful of the Metaphysics Association would have a few of them. After missing this opportunity, it was basically impossible to figure out this problem again. Seeing that I had taken the initiative to help them out, Yang Shilong and Dan Feng heaved a sigh of relief. They immediately ordered a black-robed middle-aged man to bring a new hole-searching stone over. Lu Zhenyang finally stopped, but he was still chuckling as he stared at me coldly like a wild beast that was about to devour me. I smiled at him before turning my head to the side. After being defeated by me, he had already become a joke. After I opened up my 4 meridians, he wasn't even a joke anymore. He was more like a clown. At this moment, a new hole-searching stone was brought over. Under the instigation of the members of the Beijing branch, I placed my hand on the hole-searching stone again, but this time it was my right hand. As I placed my hand on the hole-searching stone, I suppressed the undulations of the Tao Qi in my body and took the initiative to activate the dark green power. After reaching the acupoint realm, the Qi of the Wei had become a denser liquid, but this dark green energy did not change much. It was still in the form of extremely thin thread. It looked like gas, liquid, and even solid. It was hard to tell what form it was. After the dark green power was activated, I didn't need to suppress the undulations of the Tao Qi anymore and it instantly disappeared. It was strange that after reaching the pressure point realm, the two powers seemed to have separated and didn't have the feeling of being in perfect harmony. As the dark green power started to move, the demon immortal appeared on the hole-searching stone again. This time, the speed at which the ink lines appeared was terrifying. In almost an instant, the first ink line and the 10 nodes all appeared. In the next second, the second ink line and the 10 nodes appeared. In the third second, the third. In the fourth second, the fourth ink line and the 10 nodes all appeared. Everyone was dumbfounded, including me. The meridians opened by the dark green power were even more powerful than the Tao Qi. There were 4 ink lines and 40 nodes, which meant that all the acupoints on the 4 meridians had been opened. With the 2 powers added together, did I have all 8 meridians opened? How was that possible? Dan Feng had said before that 4 meridians was the pinnacle. Even Zhang Daoling, the founder of the Zhengyi sect, only had 4 meridians. How could I have 8 meridians? After thinking about it, I could only attribute these 4 meridians to the variables brought about by the dark green power. After my attempts, the Tao Qi and the dark green power could only circulate in their respective 4 meridians and couldn't communicate in all 8 meridians at the same time. Only 4 meridians were opened in one minor circulation, which meant that I was still a 4 meridian talent, but with 2 different powers. The others had different thoughts. When they saw the 4 complete meridians, almost everyone asked in unison, "Aren't there 3 meridians and 5 acupoints? Why are there 5 more acupoints?" Even Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, who were on the rostrum, gaped. They didn't know what to say. It was hard for me to answer this question. After thinking for a long time, I scratched my head in embarrassment and said, perhaps what Taoist Lu Zhenyang from the Beijing branch was right. The acupoint probing stone was broken. I clearly had 4 meridians open, but it tested me to have 3 meridians and 5 acupoints. I turned to look at Lu Zhenyang and held back my laughter. Thank you. If it wasn't for you, everyone might never know my true talent. Lu Zhenyang stood there in a daze. His face alternated between green and red. Finally, his entire face turned black and his cheeks slowly bulged. In front of everyone, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he closed his eyes and fainted on the chair. This gave me a fright. This fellow actually fainted from anger. Looking at his current appearance, it was extremely tragic. However, I didn't feel any sympathy for him. It wasn't that I was cruel, but that he didn't deserve it. Previously, he crippled Zhang Wenfei in the ranking competition and incited the Yunnan branch to take our spot. Today, he even used the Young Phoenix Gatherings rules to kill me. He had done so many evil deeds. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to take his life. Moreover, he was the one who insisted on retesting his talent. He only had himself to blame for spitting blood and fainting. The geomancers from the other branches also had strange expressions. Some of them couldn't help but lower their heads and laugh. Only Yang Shilong and Dan Feng looked embarrassed. They quickly arranged for the Metaphysics Association's people to carry Lu Zhenyang away. Then, they hurriedly announced the results of the Young Phoenix gathering. Since it was already very late after the announcement, he urged everyone to go back and rest. When I was about to leave with the Guangdong branch's people, Dan Feng ran over and told me to go back and prepare a speech. He was going to give a speech at the celebration tomorrow. After obtaining the Young Phoenix title, I definitely couldn't avoid the celebration and speech. I didn't care about it, but when I saw Dan Feng's expression, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. Come to think of it, he was also a person of status and age. Previously, when he had abandoned me, he didn't even look me in the eye. Now, after seeing my talent, he actually disregarded his esteemed status as the vice guild leader and tried to curry favor with me. It was really unappetizing. Comparatively speaking, Yang Shilong's performance was much better than his. He stood in the distance and gave me an awkward smile. Then, he turned around and left. After returning to my room, I went straight to bed. I didn't even wash up and prepared to rest. After breaking through to the next realm, the dense Tao energy in my body had already healed my injuries. However, I couldn't completely recover from my exhaustion. During the day, I had experienced the fierce battle with Lu Zhenyang. First, I was on the brink of death. Then, I experienced the ecstasy of opening my meridians. My mental state had fluctuated greatly, and I was extremely exhausted. This kind of exhaustion couldn't be completely recovered by relying on Tao energy. I could only rely on deep sleep. At this moment, the other members of the Guangdong branch, including Yang Wenfei, were extremely excited. They gathered in my room and didn't want to leave. All of them kept repeating the scene of me displaying my 4 meridians. They were so excited that it was as if they were the ones who had displayed their peerless talent. I knew that they were truly happy for me, but I couldn't interrupt their excitement. I could only accompany them and chat for half the night. After everyone's excitement had dissipated, I advised them to go back and rest. After everyone had left, I couldn't resist the exhaustion in my body and fell asleep. I slept until noon the next day. When I opened my eyes, the sunlight outside the window was already shining through the glass. On the chair beside my bed, there was a white silhouette enveloped in sunlight. At first, I was in a daze, thinking that it was Zhang Wenfei who had woken up so early. However, when I opened my eyes, I saw that the person sitting on the chair was Yi Piampian. Chapter 143. I was so scared that I sat up on the bed. Then, I realized that my upper body was naked. I quickly covered myself with the blanket and asked Yi Piampian in confusion, "When did you come in? Don't you think it's a little inappropriate for a little girl like you to barge into our room?" As soon as I opened my mouth, I didn't hear Yi Piampian's reply. Instead, I heard some rustling behind me. I turned around and saw that Zhang Wenfei had just opened his eyes. While rubbing his eyes, he asked angrily, "Zhou, who are you talking to so early in the morning?" As he said that, he lifted his head and looked in my direction. Then, his hand, which had just finished rubbing his eyes and was about to put down, froze in midair. His eyes suddenly widened and he stammered, You, Yi Piampian." I saw Yi Piampian as soon as I opened my eyes in the morning. I was relatively fine, but Zhang Wenfei probably thought that he was still dreaming. After the surprise, Zhang Wenfei quickly cracked a big smile. He was extremely happy. Unfortunately, before his smile could fully blossom, Yi Piampian, who had been sitting there like a statue, suddenly spoke. "Go out for a while. I have something to talk to him about." Yi Piampian's voice was extremely cold today. She didn't have any expression on her face. She was like a piece of 10,000-year-old ice. Could it be that something had happened? I frowned slightly. Before I could figure it out, Zhang Wenfei jumped off the bed angrily. He was probably too embarrassed to put on his clothes in front of Yi Pianpian, so he wrapped himself in the blanket and left the room in a hurry. What do you want? After Zhang Wenfei left, my voice also calmed down. Yi Pianpian stared at me without any expression on her face. Her lips moved slightly as she asked, "The true dragon vein. No matter what you're hiding, tell me in detail now." I was stunned. I didn't expect her to ask me such a question. I looked at her as if she was an idiot. Didn't I tell you yesterday? Why did you come to me again? Yi Pianpian still didn't have any expression. She just shook her head and said, "Say it again." Damn this crazy woman. She would go crazy from time to time. This time, she probably suspected me again. But this time, I didn't hide anything from her. Helplessly, I repeated what I had told her yesterday, and told her that what I had said this time was absolutely true, without the slightest concealment. I thought that Yi Pianpian would continue to pester me, but unexpectedly, after listening to my words, she simply stood up and left in a graceful manner. Could it be that she purposely came over to amuse me so early in the morning? Judging from her cold face, this girl didn't look like a person with a good taste. It was truly baffling. After Yi Pianpian left, it was getting late. I quickly put on my clothes and washed up. Then, I rushed to the venue yesterday to participate in the Metaphysics Society's victory party. As for the speech, I definitely wouldn't have the chance to do it now. While walking, I casually pondered a few sentences and decided to fool her. At the victory party, I saw Yi Pianpian again. It was strange. When she left my room in the morning, she was still wearing a white dress. Now, she had changed into a black robe, which made her look even more beautiful. She sat there and nodded at me when she saw me enter. In the morning, you still had a cold face and looked as if you would explode and kill someone if you didn't like it. Why did you suddenly nod at me now? This change in attitude was too big, right? I didn't pay attention to her and sat down at my seat gloomily. Just like a marionette, I endured the boring victory party. When the victory party finally ended, Yi Pianpian, who was sitting not far from me, stood up and seemed to want to walk over to me. My heart shuddered, and I hastily stood up and hurried away. Yi Pianpian's extremely cold appearance in the morning had left a shadow in my heart. Inexplicably, I didn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. Since I couldn't afford to offend her, I could always hide from her. Not long after I returned to my room, someone knocked on my door again. I went to open it and saw that it was Yi Pianpian again. I helplessly turned around and sat on the edge of the bed. I asked her impatiently, "Sis, what do you want? Do you have to ask me the same question twice? You even came to see me twice in one day. Can't you just ask me everything at once?" Yi Pianpian's footsteps stopped as she walked in. Her cold but beautiful face revealed a trace of doubt. She asked me, "What do you mean?" What do I mean? I couldn't help but raise my voice. Shouldn't I be the one asking you what do you mean? Yesterday, I told you how to find the true dragon's vein. I didn't know when you barged into my room last night. When I opened my eyes this morning, I was almost scared to death. I thought you were here to kill me. I didn't expect that you would just ask me about the true dragon's vein again. Tell me, is there something wrong with you? At first, I wanted to ask her if there was something wrong with her. However, when I recalled her murderous expression this morning, I wisely changed my words. Yi Pianpian furrowed her brows. After a moment of silence, she opened her mouth. I didn't come to your room last night, and I didn't ask you about the true dragon's vein this morning. I was speechless. Her words had broken my understanding of her. Yi Pianpian, who had always been arrogant and cold, could easily lie. I sneered. When I was about to call Zhang Wenfei to testify for me, Yi Pianpian's brows furrowed even tighter. She said to me, "The person you saw wasn't me." What does that mean? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I subconsciously asked, if it wasn't you, then who was it? Could it be someone who looks exactly like you? Did I make a mistake? Yi Pianpian didn't answer my question. Instead, she asked, was the person you saw wearing white clothes? I thought for a while and nodded. In the morning, I was surprised at how fast she changed her clothes. Of course, I still remembered it. I nodded and said, she was indeed wearing a white dress. You mean, that person really wasn't you? Yi Pianpian nodded slowly. I never wear white clothes. I was dumbfounded. What's going on? A twin? As I was about to ask, I suddenly remembered that when I was in Shenzhen, Yi Pianpian had barged into my room one night and asked me about the fire god temple. She was also wearing white clothes at that time. Could it be that the person wasn't Yi Pianpian? It was possible. At that time, the Yi Pianpian also asked the question I had told Yi Pianpian before. I hurriedly told her about it. Then, I asked her what was going on and if she had a twin sister. Yi Pianpian lowered her head and stayed silent for a while. Then, she shook her head and said, the situation is a bit complicated. I can't tell you too much. In short, that person is dangerous. You have to be careful. Also, I left you a phone number. If that person appears again, you have to inform me immediately. I could tell that she didn't want to talk about it. After saying that, she didn't wait for me to ask further. She immediately asked about what I said yesterday about finding a person from the metaphysics world to stand on the stone platform and offer his flesh and blood as a sacrifice. Since she asked that, I couldn't continue talking about the previous question. I could only tell her in detail about what happened when we opened the fire god temple last time. Anyway, whether I opened the fire god temple or not, it probably wouldn't affect saving the fatty. Naturally, I didn't hold back and explained everything in detail. After saying that, I hesitated for a while, and even vaguely mentioned the terrifying stone statue in the fire god temple. After listening to my words, even the usually calm Yi Pianpian's face became lifeless. Her beautiful eyes widened for a long time before she asked me in disbelief, "You're saying that there's a huge fiery obelisk there? The true dragon vein is also in the temple?" "Yes." I nodded. Although I didn't go in at the time, I could feel that it was extremely dangerous inside. If you want to go again, you have to bring more people. Also, before you go in, you have to be prepared that you won't be able to come out. Although I didn't have a good impression of Yi Pianpian, I couldn't help but want to remind such a beautiful girl. Who knew that Yi Pianpian didn't care about my reminder and asked me instead, were there any words written on the fire obsidian stone tablet? Words? After she said that, I remembered that there were words on the stone tablet. I told her, there are 8 words on it. East Jun Si Ming, Ing Huo Shou Xian. Yi Pianpian's eyes seemed to be stunned as she muttered, East Jun Si Ming, Ing Huo Shou Xian. East Jun Si Ming, Ing Huo Shou Xian. Ing Huo Shou Xian. It's actually true. HM? I frowned. What's true? Yi Pianpian didn't reply, but her cold face seemed to lose some color. She asked me anxiously, "Did you tell that white-clothed person about these things?" I was stunned before I understood what she meant. I shook my head and said, I only told her the method to open it. I didn't tell her the specific details. Yi Pianpian nodded and hurriedly told me, "All right, if she comes looking for you in the future, you must remember not to tell her the details, especially those 8 words. Also, as soon as she appears, you must immediately call me." Her words made me even more confused. I couldn't help but complain, "You won't tell me who that person is, and now you want me to keep this a secret. Aren't you forcing me to do something I can't do? If that person doesn't wear white next time and changes into the same clothes as you, how can I recognize her? Also, her strength is obviously higher than mine. If you insist on keeping this a secret, what if she attacks me? Who can guarantee my safety?" Yi Pianpian was stunned. Her fair and round nose wrinkled slightly. Then, she said to me, "She's called Yi Piaolan. The next time you see her or me, you just have to ask if you're Yi Piampian. She definitely won't answer yes. That way, you'll be able to tell her apart. As for your safety, you just have to take out the square sky fan that Grandpa Lee gave you. Once she sees the fan, she definitely won't hurt you." Her words made me completely dumbfounded. It wasn't because of the square sky fan or the method Yi Piampian had provided me with, but because of the name Yi Piaolan. The black dragon and the Qilin knot gracefully bid farewell. The stars suddenly disappear, and when they meet again, they still hold each other's hand. This was a poem that Red Shadow had embroidered on my handkerchief. When I first heard the name Yi Piampian, I felt that they were related. Now, there was another woman named Yi Piaolan, who looked exactly like Yi Piampian. Regardless of whether they were twin sisters or not, these two names were definitely related to Red Shadow. What did gracefully bid farewell mean? What exactly is the Red Shadow trying to remind me of with these words? Chapter 144. After that, no matter how I asked, Yi Piampian didn't want to talk about Yi Piaolan. When I mumbled the words Red Shadow, she looked confused and didn't react at all. This made me very discouraged. Red Shadow's farewell must be related to the two of them, but Yi Piampian didn't seem to know about Red Shadow's existence. Why was that? After Yi Piampian left, I lay on the bed alone, still thinking about this question. Up until now, the first two lines of Red Shadow's poem had some clues. The Kirin parasite, Yi Piampian, Yi Piaolan, and the last line, the stars suddenly disappear, seemed to be hinting that I had reached the glorious knowledge realm, but it also seemed to have some other deeper meaning. Although I didn't fully understand it, I could feel that the day I would meet Red Shadow again wasn't far away. When Red Shadow had disappeared into the depths of the underground palace, I had thought it was magical. But now that I thought about it, I could faintly feel her unwillingness. She probably wasn't willing, right? But Red Shadow was so powerful. Who could force her? I spent the whole night in a mess of thoughts. The next morning, when the other members of the Guangdong branch started to pack their luggage and were ready to leave, I put this matter aside for the time being. Just like what Red Shadow had said, we would meet again if we were fated to meet again. It was useless to think about it now, so it was better to wait patiently. After the Young Phoenix gathering ended, all the metaphysics branches prepared to leave. During the Young Phoenix gathering, there were 10 people from the Guangdong branch who had advanced to the acupoint sealing realm and obtained the title of Young Phoenix. In addition, there were Zhang Wenfei, who had 2 meridians, and Su Shuxing, who had 1 meridian. Even among the 7 people who hadn't reached 1 meridian, there were 3 who had 1 meridian. This kind of result was unimaginable in previous years. It was only because of all kinds of coincidences this year that we had such a result. In terms of the Young Phoenix Gathering's harvest, our Guangdong branch was firmly ranked first. Even the 2 super branches in Shaanxi and Hunan couldn't compare to us. After the Young Phoenix Gathering, according to the rules of the Metaphysics headquarters, they would still be responsible for our food and lodging. For the next month, we could stay here and exchange pointers with others. But this time, after obtaining such a shocking result, almost everyone in the Guangdong branch, except for me, couldn't wait to go back. Firstly, they had indeed been away from home for a period of time. Secondly, it was a tradition of the Chinese to return home after becoming rich. All of them could not wait to bring their achievements back to their respective branches. With this goal in mind, we quickly prepared to return to Guangdong. We packed our things and reported to the Metaphysics headquarters. Then, we prepared to leave on the same day. Before I left, to my surprise, Han Wennan came to find me. Although I had fought with him in the ranking competition, I only wanted to help Zhang Wenfei. I didn't have any enmity towards Han Wennan. When I saw Han Wennan, I thought that he wanted to compare notes with me or discuss some problems regarding cultivation with me. Unexpectedly, he directly asked about my sex inheritance and my family's situation. This was a rather private question. I was originally a bit displeased, but seeing that Han Wunnan didn't seem to have any enmity, I thought about it and restrained my temper. I smiled and told him, "My family is just an ordinary family. As for the sex inheritance, I don't have one." Hearing my words, Han Wunnan's wooden face suddenly revealed a bit of joy. He grinned and said in a low, muffled voice, "When I saw Brother Zhou borrowing magic tools from others, I felt that you didn't have any sex inheritance. Since it's like this, I wonder if Brother Zhou is willing to join our Han family?" At this moment, I finally understood what he meant. He had come to recruit me. It was normal for metaphysical families and sects to have such thoughts after displaying such astonishing talent at the Young Phoenix gathering. However, I didn't take Han Wunnan's words seriously. After thinking for a bit, I frowned and asked him, "This little brother's surname is Zhou. How can I join your Han family? Isn't that a bit inappropriate?" Han Wunnan waved his hand and continued, "Our Han family can provide the position of a foreign official. Although some of the family's core secrets can't be accessed by anyone other than the main family's direct descendants, a foreign official will at least have the status of a branch family disciple. Even from salary to resources, it's much better than a branch family disciples. It's about the same as a direct descendant disciples. Brother Zhou, you should know that metaphysical cultivation isn't something that can be done by one person. You'll need a lot of resources along the way, and it'll be hard for one person to support it all. To put it bluntly, during the ranking competition, you had to borrow magic tools from others. That's the disadvantage of not having a backer. If you join our Han family, we'll definitely be able to provide you with a few magic tools. Moreover, with Brother Zhou's talent, our Han family is even willing to provide Celestial Master magic tools." His words were very direct and very tempting. In the end, he even directly mentioned his bargaining chip, Celestial Master magic tools. I had to say that I was truly tempted, not only for the Celestial Master magic tools, but also for the name of the Han family in Qinling Mountains. Now that I had offended the Lu family and Lu Zhenyang, it was almost certain that they would take revenge on me in the future. With the Han family as my backer, the Lu family would probably be wary of me. Moreover, just like what Han Wunnan had said, the path of cultivation required endless resources. Just like when I was trapped in the Earth Master realm, if someone had reminded me earlier, I wouldn't have needed so much time. Moreover, from then on, just the cultivation of talismans, the yellow talisman paper and other items that I had purchased were all astronomical in price. Took me a long time before I had enough money to support my need. That was only the dragon-seeking realm. After breaking through to the acupuncture point realm, the resources needed would increase greatly. If I didn't have a backer, it would definitely be extremely difficult for me to do it alone. However, after thinking about it, I still didn't accept Han Wunnan's suggestion. I only nodded and said to him, "I appreciate the Han family's good intentions, but I still have some matters to attend to. Let's wait for a period of time. After I have thought about it, I will contact you." I didn't make a firm promise and instead revealed a hint of waiting for a good offer. Han Wunnan didn't mind and said with a smile, "Regardless of whether Brother Zhou joins our Han family in the end, our Han family will help you with the Lu family's matters." Originally, when he didn't mention the Lu family's matters, I thought that he wouldn't give me a guarantee. I didn't think that he would give me a pleasant surprise. I nodded and didn't reject him. I thanked him sincerely. The Lu family's matters were considered to be a small problem. It would naturally be good if someone could help me deal with it. After saying that, Han Wunnan stood up and prepared to leave. However, before he left, he gave me a name card and said hesitantly, "Brother Zhou, there's something that I've been wondering about. I don't know if I should ask you." I had a good impression of Han Wen'an, so I smiled and said, "There's no harm in asking." Han Wen'an considered her tone for a moment before saying, "Back in the qualifier, after we fought, when I tried to control my magic weapon, I noticed that it was sluggish. It's a magic weapon that I've been nurturing ever since I was a child. Logically speaking, this shouldn't have happened. So, I want to know if there's anything special about Brother Zhou's Taoist Qi?" After hearing what he said, I was shocked. When I used the Heavenly Master's magical tool to defeat him, I had used the dark green power. Although I didn't know that the dark green power would cause such an outcome, I had heard about it from someone before. Previously, when I returned to Fire God Temple, Yang Shilong had fought with the fatty's father. At that time, he had lamented that his personal instrument didn't seem to be easy to control. Recalling that incident, I was shocked. Could the dark green power be related to the fatty's father? But that ink bead was given to me by the golden head in the Yellow Springs River. How could it be related to the fatty's father? I gave a random reply and said that I didn't know the reason either. After Han Wen'an left, I was still thinking about that question. A few days ago, the dark green power could only help me increase my power. Although I was concerned about it, I didn't think that it was that important. But after I opened my meridians, the dark green power helped me open up 4 meridians. Thus, the strange power had become something similar to Taoist Qi to me. It was the foundation of my cultivation. For future considerations, I had to understand the source of the dark green power. I would probably meet the fatty's father again in the future. I would probably have to find the answer from him. We chose to leave the Metaphysics Society at night. For the rest of the afternoon, people kept appearing in my room. They were all from influential families or sects in the Metaphysics Society. Their motive was the same as Han Wen'an's, which was to persuade me to join them. Right now, I've become the most popular person out there. But in the end, I didn't agree with anyone. It wasn't that I didn't want to join other forces, but from the many things that happened in the Metaphysics Society, I realized that as long as there were benefits, there would be conflict. Anyway, I didn't have any special needs, so I wasn't in a hurry. If I needed something in the future, or if the Liu family wanted to kill me, I could find another force to protect me. As for now, it was better for me to maintain my freedom. In the evening, I brought the members of the Guangdong branch to leave the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. The 2 vice presidents, Yang Shilong and Dan Feng, came to send us off. On the way to send us off, Dan Feng asked me if any metaphysics families had contacted me. He also advised me not to join those families. If I needed anything, the Metaphysics Society would do their best to provide it. Moreover, after a period of time, when my realm increased, I could be promoted to a director or even a vice president. I wouldn't need to rely on those metaphysics families. I didn't comment on his words and just chuckled in response. After all, everything was just for the sake of benefits. On the other hand, Yang Shilong asked me about the Kirin parasite. He told me that he had been discussing it with the headquarters for the past 2 days. If there was any good news in the future, he would tell me immediately. Yang Shilong was also snobbish, but he wasn't as absolute as Dan Feng. Moreover, he was an old acquaintance, so I nodded and expressed my goodwill to him. After leaving the Metaphysics headquarters, on the bus back, we met up with Chairman Su, who was the leader of this trip. At this moment, my top-notch 4-meridian talent and the title of Young Phoenix had already spread throughout the entire metaphysics world. Naturally, President Su also knew about this news. When we met again and our gazes met, President Su could no longer maintain his arrogant attitude and quickly lowered his head and averted his gaze. Chapter 145. Due to the good results of the Guangdong Metaphysics Association, President Su warmly greeted every student. However, when he came to me, he only said a few words and the meeting was over. I didn't mind. After the car was on the road, I got up and walked to President Su's side. Su Shushing was originally sitting with him. When he heard that I had something to discuss with President Su, Su Shushing quickly stood up and prepared to give up his seat to me. At that moment, President Su frowned and said to me unhappily, "Zhou Yi, I'm talking to Xiao Su about something important. Can't you wait for a while?" Hearing his words, I smiled faintly. When I first came to the metaphysics headquarters, he had deliberately provoked Su Shushing and me. Now, he was still using this kind of method. Before I spoke, Su Shushing smiled at me. "Brother Zhou, it's okay. We don't have anything important to discuss. You can talk first." With that, he stepped aside, got up, and left. Su Shushing had a fiery temper. If it was in the past, he would have been easily provoked. However, after more than a month in the metaphysics headquarters, we had already forged a deep friendship. President Su still used the old methods to disgust people, but it was no longer enough. After I sat down next to President Su, his impatience was swept away, and a smile appeared on his face. Seeing that he wanted to chat with me, I was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. I asked him directly. That day, President Su threw me out of the office. Before I could finish, President Su interrupted me. He swore that he didn't throw me out that day, but the old witch took me away. He didn't know the rest of the matter. There was no need to argue about this matter. After he finished speaking, I calmly said, "No matter who it is, after that day's matter, one of my compasses should be in your office. Chairman Su, if you see it afterwards, please return it to me." "Compass Dharma treasure?" President Su's expression changed. After a long silence, he said hesitantly, "To be honest, I did see the compass that day. However, when I saw it, it was already broken and couldn't be used anymore. After that, I studied it for a long time and tried to restore it. In the end, I didn't succeed, so I could only throw it away, lost." I was enraged. That compass wasn't made of top-notch materials, but just the snake spirit inside was enough to make anyone in the metaphysics world view it as a treasure. President Su had thrown it away? How was this possible? My face darkened. I looked at Chairman Su and said, "That compass of mine has a spirit in it. Chairman Su should be able to see it. If you say that you want to throw it away, don't you think it's a little too perfunctory?" Although Chairman Su is in the glory of consciousness realm, I have already asked Zhang Wenfei. Chairman Su was only half meridian when he advanced to the glory of consciousness realm. His strength can only be considered average, and cannot be compared to my peak 4 meridians. Although I'm not his opponent right now, as long as he's rational, he should think about the future. He was bewildered for a while. Eventually, he pulled a long face and said to me, "I didn't know there was a spirit inside. When I picked up the compass, it was broken into several pieces. There was no spirit inside. I tried to restore it because the material and craftsmanship of the compass weren't bad." Then, he suddenly thought of something. He turned around and said hurriedly, "At that time, the old Gu woman must have seen this compass, right? Although the people of Miaojiang are good at raising Gu insects, there are some special Gu insects that are related to the spirit. The old Gu woman must have taken the spirit inside the compass." After he said that, I frowned and started to think. It wasn't that I didn't consider this possibility, but before I fainted, I heard the old Gu woman say something. She said that although this compass was exquisite, it could only be used by the Taoist sects in the Central Plains. The people of Miaojiang couldn't use it. At that time, the old Gu woman's voice was full of regret. I was sure she wasn't talking nonsense. That was why I guessed that Chairman Su had taken the compass. But now, President Su said that the compass had shattered and the snake spirit inside was nowhere to be found. If that was really the case, then it wasn't impossible for the old Gu woman to take away the snake spirit inside when she mentioned the dragon Gu. After thinking for a while, I asked Chairman Su about the compass. He opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. After a while, he stooped and searched his bag. He found a small cloth bag and gave it to me. I was surprised. Instinctively, I asked, "Didn't you throw it away?" Chairman Su smiled awkwardly. At that time, I put it in my bag and wanted to throw it away. However, I suddenly came to the headquarters, so I forgot about it. I just remembered it now. I didn't want to know if he was telling the truth or not. I received the cloth bag and opened it. It was my magical compass. However, it was just as Chairman Su had said. The compass was broken into several pieces. It couldn't be used anymore. This compass was made of tiger bone wood, which was tough and tough. Moreover, it had been nurtured by a geomancer's Taoist energy for many years. Even after 100 years, it wasn't damaged. But now it looked like this. The old Gu woman must have thrown it hard. However, I wanted to find the snake spirit, so I didn't care about the appearance of the compass. I used my Taoist energy to wrap the fragments of the compass and carefully search for the traces on it. Unfortunately, Chairman Su didn't lie to me this time. I couldn't find the aura of the snake spirit. I could only feel a faint trace of Yin energy, which was left behind when the snake spirit hadn't dissolved the Yin energy on its body. After checking, I didn't trust my judgment. I put the fragment of the compass next to the jade bracelet and asked Tong Tong to check it. Soon after, Tong Tong gave me the same answer. Begrudgingly, I returned to my seat and pondered in silence. Yang Shilong had told me that the dragon gu and the Kirin gu were the two great ancestral insects. Although the old Gu woman said that the Miao people couldn't use the compass, she didn't say that they couldn't take the snake spirit out of the compass. It seemed Chairman Su was right. The old Gu woman had taken the snake spirit. It had been more than half a year since I had gotten the compass. Although the snake spirit wasn't a good person, after living with it for a long time, I had developed some feelings for it. Moreover, Tong Tong had considered the snake spirit a good friend. Perhaps I would have to go to the Miao area to find the snake spirit. At this moment, there was another problem that made me even more depressed. The first line of the Red Shadows poem was, "Ink Dragon Kirin Not." I guessed that the Kirin was the Kirin Gu, and the ink dragon was the snake spirit. Its body was a mass of ink, and the old Gu woman called it the dragon Gu. It matched the two words very well. If that was the case, the old Gu woman had brought the snake spirit back to the Miao area. Moreover, the old Gu woman was very powerful. She had at least the glorious consciousness realm. When would I be able to find the snake spirit? I sighed. The only thing I could do now was to increase my cultivation base. Whether or not I could find the snake spirit depended on my power. During the rest of the journey, I silently stabilized my pressure point realm cultivation. The Tao Qi in my body had already turned into a stream of water that flowed in my meridians. With each cycle, it would increase a little. The other layer of dark green energy was the same. Although the amount was much less than the Tao Qi, it was also continuously circulating in my meridians. I've tried it before. After reaching this realm, I can no longer absorb the energy in the dark green bead. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's because I used the energy in the bead to seal the jade bracelet. After all, the jade bracelet had a complete true dragon vein. To completely seal its aura required a large amount of energy. This energy had probably used up all the energy in the dark green bead. There was a main vein in the human body called the heaven vein. Its location was roughly where the Tao Qi light pillar was stored after the dragon-seeking realm. After reaching the acupoint pressing realm, the Tao Qi flow would flow through the opened 8 extraordinary meridians and eventually return to the main vein. There were 10 acupoints in the main vein. As the Tao Qi continued to grow, every time an acupoint was filled, the ability of a feng shui master would increase significantly. After all 10 acupoints were filled, one could attempt to break through to the glory of knowledge realm. Therefore, feng shui masters in the acupoint pressing realm were divided into 10 different realms, from 1 acupoint to 10 complete acupoints. Feng Shui masters who had just reached the acupoint pressing realm could only fill less than 1/5 of the acupoints after the Tao Qi light pillar was squeezed through the 8 extraordinary meridians. Therefore, they couldn't be considered as one acupoint pressing realm. They could only be considered as half an acupoint pressing realm. Only when one acupoint was filled with Tao Qi could one officially become a geomaster in the acupoint pressing realm and practice most hand seals. The astral steps, which could also be practiced in the same realm, required a large amount of Tao Qi to support. One had to be at least 5 acupoints to be able to touch it. Of course, I was different from others. There were 5 Tao Qi light pillars in the dragon-seeking realm. Currently, the Tao Qi in my body was extremely close to 1 acupoint. Moreover, when my Tao Qi circulated, it passed through 3 meridians and 5 acupoints in my body. The Tao Qi in my body grew 3 times faster than others. My cultivation speed was astonishing. It took around 20 hours to return to Shenzhen from the capital. On the way back, the Tao Qi in my body continuously circulated. Finally, when I was close to Shenzhen, I had filled the first acupoint in my heaven meridian. In other words, I had reached 1 acupoint. However, before I could feel happy, I felt a burning sensation in my chest. I almost screamed. I took a deep breath and tried my best not to scream. When I was about to lower my head to check, the burning sensation spread. My chest and stomach felt as if someone had poured a bottle of sulfuric acid on me. It was so painful that I started sweating. I sat there, unable to move. Just now I had been trying to suppress my voice, but now I couldn't even open my mouth, let alone shout out. Even the qi of the Wei in my body suddenly stopped flowing and gathered at my chest. It was extremely violent and chaotic. This intense pain lasted for around half an hour before it gradually subsided. It was only then that I could finally move my body, but I still sat there quietly. It wasn't that I didn't want to move, but that intense pain had completely exhausted my body. I didn't have any strength left. Fortunately, the chaos in the Tao Qi had finally calmed down. Slowly, it began to flow in my meridians again. As the Tao Qi circulated and nourished me, the feeling of exhaustion gradually disappeared. Slowly, strength began to grow in my limbs and bones. I endured the remaining pain and stretched my hand to my chest to take a look. Originally, there was only a single horned qilin tattoo, but suddenly, a large area extended from the neck to the chest and abdomen. The entire qilin's body seemed to have grown out, from the bottom of the chest all the way around the right side of the ribs, extending to the abdomen and back. Just like the fur on the head, the entire qilin's body was covered with a layer of silver-gray fur, which made it look extremely majestic. The only flaw was that the lower part of the qilin's body was bare. It didn't have any limbs. I remembered that Yang Shilong had told me a few days ago that after planting the qilin gu, it would grow horns in the dragon-seeking realm. In the acupuncture point realm, scales would grow on its body. In the glorious consciousness realm, auspicious clouds would appear under its feet. My current situation was similar to what he had said. After opening 1 acupoint, I had officially entered the acupuncture point realm. In the ancient language, scales referred to the fur on the body. The so-called scales on the body probably referred to the appearance of the entire qilin's body and fur. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.